Hello, you lovely cups. I'm sorry about this, but I'm gonna have to be quick about this because I don't have a lot of time right now. But one thing, real quick, is there's a new What If coming. A new series that I haven't done on the channel before, and it's gonna be a Bleach What If. Now, the thing is, this was requested by Spencer, this guy, and he wanted it. So I told him, okay, if the movie of godlike talent gets 300 likes, then I'll do a Bleach What If for the first time on my channel. So, if you guys want a Bleach What If, 300 likes. You do with that information what you do. Anyway, welcome you lovely cubs to What If Tanjiro Had Godlike Talent, the movie. Without further ado, like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, and let's get right into it.
Don't you know who you are? Let's trade. Your eyes are filled with stars.
The day a legend would be born. The day of Tanjiro's birth. His mother Kie and his father Tanjiro were eagerly awaiting their first child's birth, as Tanjiro ended up coming out. He had a mark on his head. It resembled a flame pattern that covered half of his face. His eyes showed as if he was looking beyond a person, as if they weren't standing there, like he had something bigger he was looking at, a bigger picture that they couldn't comprehend. Tanjiro, who looked at his son with happiness, realized that Tanjiro was already using a breathing style. It wasn't exactly the same like the Hinokami Kagura, but he could tell that his son's blood flow was better, and that it was different from most humans. Tanjiro's condition was amazing. There was nothing wrong with him health-wise, and he ate more than his fair share, which was good, as it would allow him to grow quickly. Years passed by, and Tanjiro had gotten a younger sister. Around this time, Tanjiro had learned a lot. He could already fluently speak, and his level of intellect was beyond that of a 3-year-old boy. His talent in teaching was also very remarkable, as he was able to teach his sister all kinds of things, like how to walk even. He took great joy in his sister's development, and it was very refreshing to see her learn and grow. Another year passed, and this time Tanjiro was allowed to see his father perform the Hinokami Kagura for the first time. Together with his sister, who had already fallen asleep, he watched the dance. He was breathtaking. It was beautiful. He tried copying the dance, and he quickly did. It wasn't really that difficult. After all, he saw the joints and the muscles of his father move. Though he saw some imperfections, or at least what he thought to be imperfections. When he performed the dance, he tried fixing them. It was difficult for his body, but after a few attempts he did, and his father was happy. He had a very wide smile upon his face. The first time Tanjiro had seen his father this happy, so he continued to dance, mimicking everything his father showed him, even the breathing, to a T. Perfecting it only as he went on. At least, perfecting as he thought he was. His mother ended up crying tears of joy because the dance was that beautiful. It was the second time she cried when she saw the dance, the first time being when she had seen Tanjiro's. Tanjiro kept practicing the dance over and over because it was fun. It was exhilarating. It just captivated something within him, so he had done it for quite a while, but his father had told him to stop, as he was honoring the fire god constantly when he danced, and his father said that they should only do that about once a year. For tradition's sake, at least. Which Tanjiro didn't fully get since it was just a dance, but he went along with it. He continued to grow exponentially as he taught his sister most of the things he had learned, his sister learning a lot from being with her brother. They were inseparable. After all, she had learned how to walk from him, how to talk, and she herself was quite smart. After all, she talked a lot with Tanjiro, and her intellect had gone up quite a lot. She could already fluently speak as well by the age of 4, which was quite the surprise to their parents, but Tanjiro did make a good teacher. Nonetheless, by the age of 7, Tanjiro started helping out his family by helping cut down trees and making charcoal to sell to the villagers. His father was against the idea first, but Tanjiro really kept saying that he wanted to help. He noticed his father getting sick and that his body was slowly getting worse and worse. He had already told his mother about this, but she said that when she asked him meaning Tanjiro, that he said that he had absolutely nothing and that he was fine. So Tanjiro decided to take a more indirect approach by helping cut down trees. At one point, they got attacked by a bear, though Tanjiro's father, took care of the bear quickly. When Tanjiro saw this, he learned a lot. The movements his father made, and the swift motion he used to kill the bear. It was something he would never forget, and he would always keep in his mind. When Tanjiro turned 8, Nezuko would join in, much against Kie's will, but, well, they couldn't really decline her. She was already 6 years old, and compared to other kids, she had developed a lot. She was stronger than most kids. After all, Tanjiro had taught her how to breathe properly, or at least what he thought was breathing properly. Furthermore, Tanjiro backed her up, saying that the two of them would be more than enough to take over chores, and that Dad could stay home and help Kie. So eventually Tanjiro's mother gave in and allowed them to do the work whilst their dad stayed home. This greatly affected their father's health, as he didn't have to move around as much, and he was able to rest up a lot. Their father still died after 4 years, but those 4 years were an amazing time for the Kamado family. Tanjiro and Nezuko took care of most chores, and, well, Nezuko being there when Tanjiro sold the charcoal, she was able to sell a lot, because people always adored her. Tanjiro got adored as well. A lot of the girls in the village liked him as well, as he was a quite handsome boy and he was honest and hard-working. So he got dotted over a lot, but he didn't let it stop him from working. He continued on his way as he sold more charcoal and did what he had to do. It was around the time that their father died that Tanjiro had bought Nezuko a new dress. It was with some extra money he was saving up, and was quite a surprise to her. When she asked him why, it was just that he wanted her to wear something nice, and not some ragged-up cloth. She accepted it, being the kind-hearted person she was, but she told him that he should get something for himself next time, maybe a new axe. Though he just let it be and continued on his way. Though the family was devastated with their loss, they held together. Sometimes Nezuko would stay home to help their mother, whilst Tanjiro went on his way to sell charcoal. It was the best option since Kie couldn't handle all of the kids alone, and Nezuko, being as intelligent as she was, when she learned stuff from Tanjiro, she could help them grow and become more mature quickly. So that was their plan, yet nothing ever goes as planned. A year had passed since their father's death, and soon winter had come. Tanjiro, who is now 13, was about to set out to go to the village and sell some charcoal, yet he got stopped by his younger siblings. They all wanted to come with him, but he couldn't take them with him, as the road was too slippery, and if they fell, he couldn't assure their safety. Nezuko asked if she could come along, but Tanjiro told her it's best if she stayed home. After all, he could carry 2 baskets well on his own, and he didn't want to burden her, as she had already got a lot of work to do. She told him it was fine and that she would definitely want to come along, but eventually Kie asked if she could stay and help her. After all, they had some tasks to do. So Tanjiro set out on his own. It was nice walking on his own a few times. It got him some time to breathe and some time to clear his head. He liked to look at the snow. It was quite pleasant on his eyes. As he made his way down the mountain, he got to the village. The people greeted him warmly as he started selling his stuff. He started selling the charcoal that he had and started helping people out. They would also give him gifts for the winter, and because soon the festivities would start. He got some cloth that could be used to make a dress, and some other neat little things. It was pretty nice. He loved the people, and the people loved him. He continued on his way, and he even received a few love letters from people, though he didn't really have time to read them at the moment, as he had to make his way back before dark. He barely managed to sell both baskets as he started making his way back as he walked through the village, most of the people there telling him to stay safe and out of danger. He assured them that he would. However, as he was about to go up the mountain, he got stopped by an older-looking gentleman. He told him to get inside and that he should stay here for the night, as it would be too dangerous to climb the mountain at nighttime. The clouds were in the way of the moon, so he couldn't really see the path, and he didn't really have any torch or anything like that on him. Tanjiro pondered for a second as he then agreed, entering the old man's house and staying there for the night. He got some food which he paid the old man for, even though the old man didn't accept, and then he went off to bed. The next morning he would set out early. It was still a bit dark, but the sun was slowly rising and it would start to peek through. He made his way up the mountain and slowly but surely got home. When he got home, he smelled blood. It made him worried, so he started running towards his house. There he saw his sister outside, bloodied. She was laying on the ground, whilst laying over his brother. When he got to her, she was still breathing, though his younger brother wasn't. He looked over to his left, and there, when he entered his house, he saw his slaughtered family. He couldn't hold back his tears as he started to cry. The scent that was at his house, it was vulgar, disgusting. This wasn't a bear attack. Whatever did this was not human. Looking with his transparent world, he saw that the attacks that were left on them was definitely not made by any animals, so that also helped his theory of this being not a human that attacked them. He walked up to his mother and checked her pulse, but she wasn't breathing anymore. She was holding something. It was wrapped. It was a gift for him. He knew that they were hiding something from him, and that they wanted to give him a gift, though he didn't let them know that he knew. Tanjiro started to tear up as he opened the gift. It was a new hatchet. It looked expensive, but it was quite durable. Tears started to well up. Thank you guys so much, he would say before leaving. He grabbed his sister, who was still breathing, as he started to run down the mountain. However, he was careless. He slipped, As he fell, countless thoughts entered his head. Am I gonna really let my sister die? My last family member? He thought. Boom. He hit the ground. Luckily, there was snow laying there and it softened the fall. He got up and looked around, but he couldn't find his sister. Then eventually she stood there. Nezuko, are you alright? He asked as he ran up to her, but she attacked him. She didn't recognize him. He could instantly tell. Her body was changing, and it was weird. She was growing, yet he overpowered her. At that moment, something came at them. It was a sword. Tanjiro barely deflected it and jumped back together with his sister, who had sort of woken up and realized that she was attacking her brother. She started to tear up at this, but the man pointed his sword at Tanjiro. Do you know what you're protecting there? He asked in a serious tone. She's my sister, obviously. I'm not gonna let some maniac attack her, he said as he got up and prepared to stand in a stance. It was very basic and nothing much, but somehow Giyu, the man who pointed his sword at Tanjiro, felt threatened. Your sister is turning into a demon, and by the looks of it, she's starving. If I don't stop her now, she'll hurt someone, Giyu said as he flashed, rushing towards Tanjiro. However, Tanjiro could follow his movements. Giyu wasn't really rushing towards Tanjiro, he was rushing towards Nezuko, yet Tanjiro kicked him away. Giyu was impressed that Tanjiro caught up to him. After all, Tanjiro was just a citizen, and he didn't really have anything going for him that he was part of the Demon Slayer Corps. Tanjiro started begging him to not take his sister. It's the only thing he saw fit doing, as he didn't want to harm Giyu or fight him. Giyu yelled at Tanjiro. Why don't you fight then? You have more than enough strength to protect her. The fact that you just kicked me away whilst I was rushing at near full speed to your sister proves that. So fight, Giyu said, which woke up Tanjiro. However, before Tanjiro rushed at Giyu, Nezuko spoke. Brother? She would say as she was barely staying awake. She seemed to be tired as she was still crying. Tanjiro turned around and went up to his sister, saying that he was here. Something was changing with her. Her veins kept popping out, as if she was using a breathing technique. It's then that Giyu realized she was a demon who was using her breathing technique. Interesting, he thought. It's at that moment that one of Nezuko's veins on her arms popped. It regenerated, but it was weird. The blood that came out was sizzling. It was hot. It melted the snow very, very quickly. It happened on all of her limbs. Even the veins on her chest popped. Her eyes, which had changed, turned back a bit to what they originally were. They were still different, but they changed back a bit, as she had passed out right after. Tanjiro put his kimono over her, as he was worried about her. It appears she's rejecting the demon cells within her, though she can probably not keep that up for long. I best eliminate her now before she gets dangerous. After all, a demon that can use a breathing technique, I wouldn't want to imagine what that could do, Giyu said as he took his blade and rushed at her. However, Tanjiro, whose mood was now way worse than before, kicked him away once more. Before Giyu could say anything, he rushed at Giyu, as he had pulled out his axe, the one he had gotten from his family, as well as the one he already had. He hit Giyu with a blunt side, both on his hip and on his shoulder, making Giyu twist as Giyu's body spun around. This power, he thought, but he got hit in the stomach with the top side of the axe being sent into a tree. Giyu was already bleeding. The speed Tanjiro had just displayed wasn't human. Is this boy also a demon? He thought as he got back up. However, he saw Tanjiro's veins. They were bulging. He was mad. Mad that this person wanted to kill his sister when he had already lost his family. Tanjiro took a breath, which Giyu realized, and in a second he leaped forward, but Giyu couldn't block the attack. So he tried to step back, but Tanjiro's attack still hit. It was a shallow cut, but it hit his entire chest, which made Giyu worried. He couldn't react to the speed Tanjiro was displaying. So Tanjiro started running. He ran around the trees, and at one point he threw a rock at Giyu, which nearly hit him, though Giyu deflected it barely. At that point Tanjiro rushed forward, striking Giyu from the front. Giyu barely blocked the attack once more, and his blade even started to chip. It's then that he realized Tanjiro's other axe wasn't in his hand. As he looked up, the axe had barely grazed him as it cut his cheek and part of his ear. He once again kicked Tanjiro away and made some space. If this boy got proper training, no. If this boy got put in the Demon Slayer Corps, he could... Giyu started thinking, but he didn't have time to think. Tanjiro once again rushed at him, this time gripping his axe even harder as he slashed towards Giyu. Giyu tried to block, but this time his sword snapped. Giyu only had half a sword left, which wouldn't be able to stop these attacks. Tanjiro looked like a monster. He was enraged, but Giyu couldn't feel anything from him. It was like he was in a tranquil state, yet his emotions clearly depicted on his face that he was angry. The fight continued, and Giyu tried to stab Tanjiro with a water-breathing technique. However, Tanjiro dodged, hitting Giyu on all his joints with the blunt side of his axe, disabling one of his arms. Giyu, who had one arm left, tried to attack Tanjiro once more. However, Tanjiro grabbed him by the wrist, dropping one of his axes, and slammed Giyu into the ground over his shoulder. Giyu coughed up blood and laid there, as Tanjiro had already put an axe to his neck. I won't kill your sister, Giyu said. This made Tanjiro take back his axe as he put it in its new sheath. The other one was practically broken, so he just left it there. Tanjiro made his way over to his sister. However, he got stopped. Wait. You might be able to cure your sister from becoming a demon, he said, as Tanjiro turned around and looked at him. Go to Mount Natogoro and find Mr. Orokodaki. Let him teach you proper swordsmanship. Then join the Demon Slayer Corps and fight demons. Maybe that way you can find a cure for your sister, Giyu said as he disappeared. Tanjiro knew where he went, but he wasn't gonna pursue him. Before Giyu had left, he had said something about not letting his sister get exposed to the sun as well, so Tanjiro thought that he better get back home. He did, and he buried his family. It's at this point that Nezuko also woke up. She talked to her brother, and Tanjiro talked back to her. It was such a relief that she was okay. Tanjiro prepared everything that they needed, and they both buried their family. Nezuko still crying tears over the loss, but Tanjiro said that they had to move on. She trusted her brother wholeheartedly. She held her hand, and they made their way to Mount Natogoro. Tanjiro and Nezuko talked as they walked. They walked down the mountain as they talked about everything that was going on. Tanjiro was mostly consoling her as Nezuko was sad. It was normal. After all, she had just lost her family, and all she had left was Tanjiro. Plus, there was something going on with her that she couldn't even explain. Her body hurt, but she kept moving on to not worry Tanjiro. He knew, though. When they arrived at the bottom of the mountain, they started walking through the village. The people who saw them commented on Nezuko's new look. Her hair was different, and she seemed to be a bit taller. When they got out of the village to go to the next one, Tanjiro carried his sister. She was in pain, and he could see it. He carried her all the way until they arrived at a mountain. Night was approaching quickly, and they had already traveled a great distance over this first day. Tanjiro hadn't really listened that much to Giyu, and his sister seemed to be fine in the sun, but that was that. When they walked up the mountain, Tanjiro could smell blood. He quickly made his way up the mountain with his sister on his back. He arrived at where the scent was coming from. When he saw it was a small temple. He put his sister down as he went ahead without her. He opened the door, and there was a demon feasting on the monks there. The demon saw Tanjiro and attacked him. Tanjiro jumped back, dodging the attack. He saw the demon's movements, clear as day. The demon rushed at Tanjiro, and he grabbed his axe. This wasn't a human, yet he still had lingering doubts about whether or not he should slash. In a mere split second, he had made up his mind, and he slashed at the demon, decapitating it. But the demon started moving around. Tanjiro didn't have a Nichiren sword, and killing a demon with a normal axe wouldn't work like this. Tanjiro thought about what he could do, and the most logical thing he thought of was to, crush its head. So he did exactly that. He used his axe and crushed the demon's head, but it still seemed to live as its body moved around. Tanjiro was thinking about what he had to do, and, he'd either have to hold off this demon until sunlight, or, that was it. He didn't have any other options. He held off the demon whilst Nezuko watched. She was still in pain, and she wasn't in any state to fight, let alone Tanjiro wouldn't let her. She was his sister, after all. Every time he slashed a demon, it just seemed to regenerate the part that was slashed. Plus, because he decapitated it, he had to fight on two sides. The head would come after him, and, the body would too. It wasn't like he had any trouble fighting this demon, but it was just annoying. The demon tried to run, but Tanjiro held it by its hair. As the sun came up, it turned into ashes, and the demon disappeared. Tanjiro went back inside the temple together with his sister. The monks were all dead. If he had arrived maybe 10 minutes earlier, he could have saved one of them. He gave them a burial together with Nezuko as they continued on their way. It took another half day to get to Mount Sagiri. There, Tanjiro got greeted by someone who was about to leave. It was a man wearing a red mask, an older gentleman, so to speak. "Are you Tanjiro Kamado?" The old man spoke as he looked down. "Yeah, that's me. I take it you're Mr. Orokodaki? The one Giyu told me to find?" Tanjiro would say, but Orokodaki just told him to follow him. After about 5 minutes, they arrived at Orokodaki's house. There, Orokodaki started asking questions, like how Nezuko could walk in the sunlight, as she wasn't affected by it, but she was a demon. There were some questions that Tanjiro couldn't answer, and neither could Nezuko. Orokodaki explained what the plan was and how they would train him, or how Tanjiro would be trained. It's then that Nezuko asked if she could also be trained. After all, she was finding a cure for herself, and she didn't want to burden her brother with all that. After thinking about it for a while, Orokodaki agreed, much against Tanjiro's dismay, who was disagreeing with this whole thing. But after seeing his sister's determined face, he decided to let it go. Tanjiro said that he already knew a breathing style, which surprised Orokodaki, who asked him which one. Tanjiro didn't have a name for his breathing style, but just said that he learned it from his father, and that it's the dance of the fire god, or the Hinokami Kagura. Orokodaki thought about it and told Tanjiro that he'd eventually have to ask the Flame Hashira for help. I also heard from Giyu that you beat him in a fight. You already beat a Hashira, so you're quite strong. I'll just be giving you the basics and everything you need to know, as you're already physically stronger than most, and as you'll hunt demons, you'll just get stronger over time, Orokodaki said as he started explaining some things already, like breathing and why it's effective, the Nichiren swords, all of that stuff. Training started the next day. Orokodaki would train Nezuko and Tanjiro. Nezuko would have to do the test of running down the mountain, whilst Tanjiro instantly went to hand-in-hand combat and swordsmanship forms and all of that. He had a really easy grasp on everything right away. It didn't even take him an hour before mastering something. Even if Orokodaki didn't explain something, he himself made the connections and learned it himself. After a week of training, Tanjiro had already basically mastered everything Orokodaki could give him. Orokodaki then gave Tanjiro his test. Together with Nezuko, they walked up the mountain. There, Orokodaki gave Tanjiro a boulder. There were two boulders right next to each other. They were the same size. He told Tanjiro to cut it. Nezuko looked at the boulder next to the one that was Tanjiro's and asked if she would have to cut one too, but Orokodaki told her that her training was not complete yet. Before Orokodaki left, Tanjiro took a breath and sliced the boulder with ease. Orokodaki saw this and said that Tanjiro could take part in the final selection exam. That very same night, Tanjiro took part in quite the celebration together with Orokodaki. They ate quite good food. Nezuko still got the same proportions as normal, and Orokodaki said that once she cut her boulder, she would get the same food Tanjiro did, which kind of put a bit of spirit in her, which she already had enough of, but even more so now. Orokodaki gave Tanjiro a mask, and told him that once he finished the final selection, he was welcome to come back here until he got his own Nichiren sword and all of that. After 4 days, Tanjiro set out for his final selection exam. Orokodaki wished him luck. His sister did too. The more days passed as she trained, the more and more she looked back like a human, but Tanjiro was still worried about her because she coughed up blood every so often. He thought that this might have been a side effect because of Muzan's blood, so he wanted to get this final selection thing over as fast as possible. He made his way over to the final selection exam area. There weren't a lot of people there. There were only 7, including himself. The final selection started. He had an easy time. For the next 7 days, Tanjiro had no demon that could even get close to, hurting him in any way, shape, or form. He'd ask them questions, but they wouldn't answer. Stuff like, where's Muzan, or how can I cure someone from being a demon? Stuff like that. But the demons wouldn't answer. Eventually, Tanjiro got approached by this massive demon, who laughed. The demon remarked how Tanjiro wore a mask, and that he must be one of Orokodaki's students. Yet Tanjiro just looked at the demon as he prepared to get into a stance. The demon fell into a state of fear. It wasn't his own fear. It wasn't his trauma for Orokodaki, no. It was the Muzan blood within him. His demon cells. They were screaming. Right now he could see the after image of someone else. It was Muzan Kibutsuji's memory. Before the demon could even wake up from this, he had already been decapitated. He wondered if this was the end. He regretted things. He just wanted to play with his brother one last time. Tanjiro showed his remorse and prayed to Buddha to let this demon reincarnate into the next life and live a good life. The demon disintegrated, and Tanjiro continued his way. Demon after demon, he'd slay them. The last day, Tanjiro just laid down. He was laying on top of a rock as he looked into the sky. He could see birds flying through the trees. Crows, to be exact. A few crows even landed on the branches near Tanjiro and just looked at him. He had cleared out over half of the demons on the mountain. Right now he was just sitting there, waiting. He didn't feel like hunting anymore, and plus, he just had to survive. There wasn't even so much as a speck of dust on Tanjiro. He just sat there. When the exam came to an end, he made his way over to the middle of the mountain, the top, where, well, the exam ended. When he made his way over, he couldn't see anyone. He was there alone. He looked around, but no, the other slayers either died or they didn't make it. They gave up. That's what he thought. He got approached by an older-looking woman and 2 children. One of the crows that Tanjiro had seen earlier landed on her shoulder and almost whispered something in her ear, which Tanjiro thought was kind of funny and cute at the same time. She spoke. "Congratulations on finishing the final selection exam. You did better than fantastic, I would say. We're gonna walk you through the process of becoming a demon slayer. We'll have to get your measurements, and you'll get to pick an ore for your sword," the woman said as she led Tanjiro towards a table. The 2 younger ones looked at Tanjiro with admiration. He just smiled back to them. When he arrived at the table, he looked down to see a bunch of little clumps of ore. "Please choose one," the lady said. Tanjiro had a difficult time choosing. He took a look at the ores, but he couldn't really see anything even with a transparent whirl. When he used his nose to try and sniff one out that would suit him, there were 2 that came really close. Instead that he just chose one that felt better within his hand. He told the lady that he'd be taking this one as she took it over and wrapped it into a little package that a crow then took away. Instead that they took Tanjiro's measurements for his uniform and even tattooed something on his hand. The lady said that Tanjiro showed a lot of potential, and that she would be excited to see him become a Hashira soon. Tanjiro didn't make any note of this and just made his way back to Orokodaki's residence. The final selection exam was rather easy and didn't pose much of a problem. He arrived at nighttime. There he saw Orokodaki and his sister. His sister looked even more like how she did before. Not as the demon that she was, but more like her human self. Her eyes had turned back a bit more to what they were before. She hugged her brother, and Orokodaki looked proudly at Tanjiro. He remarked that Tanjiro looked fine and that he didn't look injured at all. Tanjiro smiled and just entered as they had a bit of a party. Orokodaki then brought something up, something quite interesting. He remarked how Nezuko kept coughing up blood, which Tanjiro was worried about. He instantly started asking questions. "Is she alright? Does she have a sickness or something? Is this related to Muzan?" "Calm down, young Kamado," Orokodaki said as he calmed Tanjiro down. "I think that your sister is coughing up the blood of Muzan. That's why she's becoming more and more human. She's rejecting the demon's blood." Tanjiro smiled. He was happy. He looked at his sister and spoke. "That means you're gonna be back to your old self, right?" But he got interrupted. "No. She'll be physically stronger and, well, the chance of her dying is still quite big. But if she manages to survive, then you wouldn't have to worry that much about her, as she'll be strong on her own, Orokodaki said, which calmed Tanjiro down again. Orokodaki and Tanjiro spoke about the final selection exam. Tanjiro spoke about this green demon who was targeting Orokodaki students, and he made a note of this. Under his mask, though, a tear dropped. Before Orokodaki could continue talking, Tanjiro spoke. "I will continue to be a demon slayer," he said as he looked at his sister. "My sister might be cured and might survive, but if I can help stop this evil, then why wouldn't I help? I want to stop this pain and suffering that these people felt," Tanjiro said as Orokodaki nodded. He was glad to have had a student like Tanjiro as he patted him on the head. Another 2 weeks or so went by. This time Tanjiro's weapon, his Nichiren blade, had been finished forging. An older-looking gentleman came and brought it. Tanjiro could see his face and his body, so he knew he was older. After all, with the transparent world, using fabric to hide one's body didn't help much. He showcased Tanjiro's sword and was happy to have made it, as he explained that it was a child of fire who chose the ore. Tanjiro looked at the blade. It has a black scabbard and black cord wrap. The guard on it was a red wheel, which Tanjiro found nice. He unsheathed the blade and grasped it in his hand. It turned black and then crimson red, which made the smith excited, as he had made a crimson red sword. But when Tanjiro let go of his grip, it had turned back to black. He sheathed the blade and thanked the weaponsmith for it. It's then that the crow landed on his shoulder and told him to go to his first mission, to go west. The smith was still confused but happy nonetheless, and, well, Tanjiro said his goodbyes to his sister and to Mr. Orokodaki, asking Mr. Orokodaki to take good care of his sister and that he'd see his sister as much as possible. Nezuko agreed and smiled, saying that even if she was cured, she would still join the Demon Slayer Corps just like her big brother, because, after all, she wouldn't want others to experience what she experienced that night. Tanjiro set out to his first mission. He headed west to a small village. There, it didn't even take him 10 minutes into the night to find the demon, as he made quick work of it. The crow landed on his shoulder and congratulated him on completing his first mission well. His crow was a younger one. It had a lot of spunk. But Tanjiro just asked for the next mission, the next demon's location. And so time passed rather quickly. Tanjiro killed maybe 6 to 7 demons every night. That was probably the lowest amount. On highest, he would have killed around 10 to 12 if he could get into the areas quick enough and find the demons quickly. He didn't stop. For at least 5 days straight, he just ran and ran and ran. No sleep, only stopping for eating and taking care of his body, but he didn't sleep. The crow was concerned about Tanjiro. His demon kill count was already around the 40s, and, well, the crow had a lot of missions, but Tanjiro took care of them so quickly that, well, that was that. The crow asked Tanjiro if he didn't want to rest, go to a Wisteria mansion. It was actually on orders that he got told to tell Tanjiro that, but Tanjiro didn't stop. He told the crow to just give him the next demon's location, and so the crow did, just giving what he knew. Tanjiro made his way to the next location. It was a ruined village. How could anybody still live here? He thought, but then he saw children in ragged clothes who were scraping by just for some food, and adults who looked to have a lot of food just dragging them along. Despicable, Tanjiro thought as he saw this, but he couldn't say anything. One of the adults in the village looked at Tanjiro and ran away quickly, heading to a forest. Tanjiro saw this and worried. He knew that maybe this village was offering humans to the demon. He had seen it before in a village and it was absolutely disgusting. He followed the human into the forest. It was still daytime, so he wasn't afraid of any demons showing up. When he found the human, it was near a cave. When he entered the cave, he heard the human talking about a slayer appearing in the village to some demon. Tanjiro used his sense of smell and followed to where the human was. He eventually came face to face with the demon. There were only 2 torches here, so it wasn't really lit well, but he could see that this demon was sitting on a throne of bones. The demon stood up and killed the human that was in front of him, as he smirked and smiled. The demon who came in the light had the number 2 in his left eye. His right eye had lower moon in it. Lower moon 2. Tanjiro was on guard instantly, as he heard from Orokodaki that the lower and upper moon were quite strong and that he'd have to take care of himself. He unsheathed his blade, which turned crimson red right away. Using the transparent world, he could see the movements the demon was making as the demon rushed towards him, but it all seemed so slow. Tanjiro swung his sword and decapitated the demon before the demon could even land anything on Tanjiro. The demon's head fell on the floor and started cussing out Tanjiro, but it turned to ash rather quickly. Tanjiro just sheathed his blade and looked at it. As he made his way out of the cave, he looked up to the sky. Daytime was still around and the air seemed nice. His crow landed on his shoulder and asked for a report. Tanjiro walked to the village and spoke about the demon, Lower Moon 2, that he had slain. The crow trusted Tanjiro's words, but also knew that the demon here was stronger, as they had already sent slayers after it, and many slayers had died. Tanjiro arrived at the village, and there he told the villagers that they no longer had to worry about the demons. The children looked happy, but they were still in ragged clothing. They were probably the sacrifices for the demons, but Tanjiro couldn't get involved too much. He made his way out the village as his crow told him that he had to go to Demon Slayer HQ. Tanjiro had to return to the Demon Slayer HQ. He got told so by his crow, so he departed, following his crow closely behind. His crow was already flying relatively fast, but he was keeping up pretty easily. Eventually, after traveling for more than half a day, he arrived. There was a Kakushi there waiting for him. The Kakushi approached him and bowed, not saying anything, but gesturing that he should follow them. So he did. He followed them, and shortly after he arrived in front of a big gate. They opened it, and then he saw many other people, one of which he recognized. Giyu Tomioka, the water pillar. He greeted him, but shortly after, before he could say anything else, a man had shown up. All of the other people bowed. Tanjiro proceeded to do so as well, to show respect. It was the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, Kagaya Ubiyashiki. He introduced himself to Tanjiro and thanked him for making time to come here. He spoke in a soft but soothing tone. Tanjiro, you have proven yourself quite worthy of becoming a Hashira in less than 3 weeks' time, no less. It's quite an impressive feat. I would like to invite you to the ranks of Hashira, Ubiyashiki said as he then started explaining all the benefits Hashira would have over normal demon slayers. Tanjiro already slightly knew about this from Orokodaki, but he was confused because, well, he couldn't really become a Hashira now, could he? He had only joined the Demon Slayer Corps not even a month ago. Yet still Ubiyashiki said that Tanjiro's achievements were more than enough for him to become a Hashira. It's then that one of the other Hashira spoke up. It was a man with white hair who was covered in scars all over his body. He asked that Tanjiro do a demonstration of power to showcase how strong he actually was, which Tanjiro was fine with. Ubiyashiki then decided that they would hold a spar between Shinazugawa, the man who had spoken up, and Tanjiro Kamado. And thus they all moved over as they all went to a nearby arena. There, Ubiyashiki explained the rules of the duel. Whoever either knocked out the other person or got 10 hits in would win. It was rather simple. Both fighters got in a stance, with Tanjiro instantly going into the first form of the Hinokami Kagura. Their fight starts and Tanjiro rushes forward as he tries to use the first form dance. However, he hadn't anticipated that Shinazugawa would also rush forward as he used the first form of wind breathing, Dust Whirlwind Cutter, as he launched himself forward and started slashing continuously, making it almost seem like a horizontal tornado was headed towards Tanjiro. Tanjiro had to go on the defensive as he started blocking each move, using water breathing to do exactly that. Water breathing's second abbreviated form, reverse water wheel, Tanjiro would say as he spun backwards vertically whilst slashing his sword, deflecting Shinazugawa's incoming slash and making him have to step back. Tanjiro didn't let up as he knew a move that would go perfect with this, the fifth form of the Hinokami Kagura, setting Sun Transformation, as he used the momentum of his backflip to deliver a powerful slash that Shinazugawa barely blocked, as he got slashed partially, blocking the rest with his sword, but sent flying. Almost out of the arena, Shinazugawa took a breath as he recovered from the sudden impact. He smirked as he thought to himself, "This kid is stronger than he looks." He gripped his sword as he launched himself forward to Tanjiro again. However, Tanjiro looked calm. He gripped his sword as his blade turned from its usual black self to crimson red, surprising most of the Hashira watching. Shinazugawa was so focused on the fight that he didn't care. As he rushed towards Tanjiro, he turned his body, rotated it, as he did a sort of uppercut motion. Sixth form, Blackwind Mountain Mist, as he created an arcing slash that headed straight towards Tanjiro. It was a surprise to Tanjiro because Shinazugawa was still quite far away from him. His blade would never reach. However, the sheer amount of pressure sent out a gust of wind that pushed Tanjiro back. Shinazugawa took this chance as Tanjiro had been pushed back and rushed in again, using another form. The second form, Claw's Purifying Wind, as he sliced diagonally 4 times. Tanjiro barely blocked 2. Got hit by the other 2 as he got launched backwards. Shinazugawa smirked and spoke. Maybe you're not ready to be a Hashira yet, if you can't handle this much," he said as if he was not really giving it his all. Tanjiro simply straightened out his back as he gripped his sword once more, it turning an even brighter crimson red than before. He took a breath, and in an instant he closed the gap between him and Shinazugawa. His eyes, which had gone from its previous liveliness, looked as if there was no emotion there. Tanjiro started taking this fight for real. as he unleashed another form of the Hinokami Kagura, the sixth form, Solar Heat Haze. As Shinotsugawa goes and tries to block the attack, but he gets hit anyway, because he couldn't time it. The entire purpose of Solar Heat Haze was to make him believe that the blade was yet to hit the mark, although he had already been slashed. Twice. Tanjiro didn't let up as he instantly went into the seventh form, Beneficent Radiance. He spiraled into the air before coming down and delivering a quite heavy slash that barely hit Shinotsugawa on his leg as he tried to dodge. However, it still got counted as a point. In an instant, Tanjiro had gotten 3 points. Shinotsugawa's face, which had a calm, smirky demeanor before, had now turned into that of anger and rage as he rushed in, using the 9th form of wind breathing, the Idaten Typhoon. He jumped into the air, performing a backflip, and whilst he was upside down, he would unleash a powerful slash that would create a powerful gust of circular wind. It was destroying the arena. However, Tanjiro simply took a breath and took another stance. He lowered his body and gripped his sword with both hands as he brought it behind his back. As the sword reached above his head, he took a breath, and for a moment, it seemed like he disappeared. The 9th form of the Hinokami Kagura, Dragon Sun Halo Head Dance. In an instant, Tanjiro had moved, similar to Constant Flux, but this time, the force, the wind pressure that he was creating per turn and slash, it was enough to cancel out Shinotsugawa's Idaten Typhoon, as Tanjiro went in and hit another hit on Shinotsugawa. This one was pretty grave, as he had hit Shinotsugawa near the chest region, almost hitting a vital spot. Shinotsugawa, who was now in a falling motion, tried to counteract as he tried to use the 4th form of wind breathing. However, before he could, Tanjiro used another form, Burning Bone Summer Sun, as he slashed Shinotsugawa again, hitting 6 times. Shinotsugawa jumped back and tried to use recovery breathing, however, Tanjiro came in right away. This time he used water breathing, striking tide, instantly following up with flowing dance, the 3rd form of water breathing. Before Shinotsugawa could recover, he had used a 6th form, Whirlpool, which he used in combination with the movements of flowing dance to have an even greater technique, hitting Shinotsugawa 4 more times, concluding their battle. Shinotsugawa sat there as the Kakushi came up to him and started treating him. He was dumbfounded. He was left useless in front of Tanjiro after Tanjiro had tried to put a bit of effort into their fight. It was a gap he didn't think he would have with someone who had barely joined the Demon Slayer Corps. It enraged him, but at the same time, he was excited, because this meant that he could spar with Tanjiro more often and become even stronger. Ubuyashiki concluded the battle, as he announced that Tanjiro would from now on be a Hashira. However, this made one particular girl put up her hand, Mitsuri Kanroji, the Love Hashira. She asked what Tanjiro's title would be, since they already had a Water Hashira, namely Giyu Tomioka, and Tanjiro doesn't appear to have learned any other breathing technique. However, this is when Tanjiro interjects and says that he had learned a breathing technique from his father and adapted it to change into its own fighting style. This gets backed up by Giyu saying that he saw Tanjiro use movements that are not part of the water breathing techniques. This also made one other person speak up, Kyojiro Rengoku, who said that some of the movements look similar to flame breathing, but that he couldn't quite put a finger on it. In the end, Tanjiro explained that the breathing technique he learned was something he had learned from his father to honor the fire god. or Dance of the Fire God, is what he would perform, and he turned that into a fighting style, even changing the movements to be better than what they were before. Ubiyashiki thought about it, but simply calling Tanjiro the Fire God Hashira wouldn't really work. This is when Kyojuro Rengoku asked Tanjiro if he had any ancestry in demon slayers. After all, he commented about how Tanjiro had a mark and that he also had the crimson red blade, which seemed to be different from his own red blade. When Ubiyashiki asked further about the details, Kyojuro just said that he had heard his father grumble about it a lot, that there's people out there, talented people, that have marks at birth, stuff like that. Tanjiro says that he did have a mark at birth, which makes Kyojuro think for a second. He says that there was a breathing style, the original breath, sun breathing, as he says that the Hinokami Kagura might be a deviant from it, maybe a closer descendant from it than what the other breathing styles are, like water breathing and flame breathing and wind breathing. Ubiyashiki thinks about it, but so far they had already found a descendant of the original breath user, Muichiro Tokito. He wondered if there were any descendants that they didn't know about, and asked Tanjiro if he really didn't have any demon slayers in his family. It's then that Tanjiro spoke. He remembered a dream he had gotten a while back, about a man who performed a dance similar to the Hinokami Kagura, but it seemed to be an actual sword-fighting technique. It's then that he remembered that this man was also holding a sword that looked very similar to, well, a Nichiren blade. He brought this up, which made the Hashira talk about inherited memories, stuff like that. Tanjiro didn't quite get it, but after some discussing, Ubiyashiki thought that Tanjiro might really be a user of sun breathing. So, he asked Rengoku to look into it, and that for now Tanjiro would be called the Hinokami Hashira. The symbol on his hand, which was the tattoo that he had let place, had turned into a sort of sun. Ubiyashiki explained that this would be temporary, and that if Tanjiro truly was a user of sun breathing, he would be changed to the Sun Hashira. But for now they would just call him the Hinokami Hashira, not calling him a god, but simply calling it after his breathing style, which Tanjiro accepted. The other Hashira all quickly went and introduced themselves to him, the first one being Mitsuri Kanroji, who was the most excited about seeing Tanjiro. But that was just in her nature after all. After their introductions, Ubiyashiki started speaking and started things that would change in the Demon Slayer Corps, stuff like that. After that, Tanjiro got brought over to an entire mansion. It was land that wasn't all too far away from the Demon Slayer HQ, but it still took him 2 hours to get there after being escorted by a Kakushi. It was a mansion with quite beautiful land. It was not all too big, but also not small. At least 2 families could live here. It was all his. It was a gift from the Demon Slayer Corps for his Hashira promotion. He had a few Kakushi there and a few people that instantly introduced themselves and said that they would be Tanjiro's servants, which made him cringe a bit, but he accepted it for what it was. 2 days passed in which Tanjiro trained and rested his body fully. He had really needed some proper sleep. It's then that his crow, which looked to be proud as ever, came up to Tanjiro and spoke. It had received orders, not from the Demon Slayer Corps for Tanjiro to go and kill another demon. No, it was from another crow, Kyojuro Rengoku's crow. Tanjiro followed his crow, as his crow had told him that they had to go to the Flame Hashira's estate. As they went there, eventually they arrived, and Tanjiro got greeted warmly by Kyojuro. There seemed to be a man there who was drinking some alcohol, and he looked at Tanjiro with angered eyes as he was about to start cussing Tanjiro out, but didn't. There was also a younger boy who seemed to be in training attire. He greeted Tanjiro warmly too. Kyojuro invited Tanjiro inside, and Tanjiro followed. They all sat at a table, and the older-looking gentleman didn't really seem to care so much. Kyojuro introduced his father, Shinjiro, and said that his father had records of a Hashira, a flame Hashira of the past meeting the original Sun Breath user. There were a few details in there, but not enough to explain everything. Shinjiro, who had stopped drinking, spoke. It was a sad tone, one filled with only sadness and a bit of anger. When he addressed Tanjiro, he was very impolite and very informal. He spoke about how people with talent, Sun Breath users in particular, would be born with marks and they would have a crimson-red sword. There were some other things, but Tanjiro really didn't bat an eye. However, Shinjiro asked Tanjiro to display his forms, his techniques, and that he would be the judge of whether or not Tanjiro would be an actual Sun Breath user or not. He revealed the book he had. There were a few pages that were torn. In fact, many of the pages were torn, only a few were still intact. He had tried not to drink for the last 2 days. After all, Kyojuro, his son, had begged him to try and be there. After all, this could be an historical moment for the Demon Slayer Corps. And after a lot of persuasion from his son, he hadn't tried to drink any alcohol, but he was still angered at his own weakness. However, after asking Tanjiro to perform the moves, he looked at Tanjiro in the eyes for the first time. Tanjiro didn't bear any arrogance, didn't bear any sort of hatred. In fact, it almost looked like Tanjiro had no emotions at all. All he saw was his reflection in Tanjiro's eyes, staring back at him, not with any judgment or anything like that. For a moment it felt like his world froze. He thought about his behavior, about how he acted towards his sons. He snapped out of it. He stood up as he brought Tanjiro outside. But instead of Tanjiro simply having to prove himself and show the moves, Shinjiro had brought out his own Nichiren sword from the time when he was still a demon slayer. Kyojuro tried to stop his father, but Tanjiro signaled that it was fine. Right now, Shinjiro needed this more than anything, to prove that he could at least fight against a Sun Breath user. Their fight started, and blow after blow they went at it. Tanjiro used a lot of his strength and was quite surprised by the strength of Shinjiro. Even though Shinjiro wouldn't be on his level in terms of technique and perfection, Shinjiro was able to keep up the pace quite well. In fact, a lot of the moves were instigated by Shinjiro. It showed the experience he had and the amount of times he had fought demons and how many times he had staked his life. He instinctively dodged Tanjiro's moves that were fatal blows and landed his own in the meantime. It was impressive. Tanjiro, whilst watching this, learned so much. He was being disrespectful by not showing his true strength to Shinjiro, so he took a breath. In an instant, the aura around Tanjiro changed. It didn't feel cold, it didn't feel hot either. It was this intimidating aura. Tanjiro's eyes had no emotion in them as he entered the selfless state and transparent world. He read every single one of Shinjiro's moves and acted accordingly, deflecting Shinjiro's attacks or basically sending them back at him. He showed every single move of the Hinokami Kagura in their fight, as the fight ended with Shinjiro landing on his butt and Tanjiro holding his sword towards the man's neck. Shinjiro smiled for the first time in a long time. It shocked Kyojiro to his core, as he put his hands up and admitted his defeat. Tanjiro sheathed his blade and extended his hand as he helped the man up, smiling. Shinjiro looked at his children and waved at them to come over, both of his sons doing exactly that as they approached their father. Kyojiro still had a shocked face, but his younger brother seemed to be excited. Shinjiro took a big breath and hugged both his sons as he apologized, saying that he was sorry for his behavior and that he should have been there for them and how proud he was of them, as he spoke of how proud he was of Kyojiro for becoming a Hashira on his own, and how proud he was of his other son for finding his talents in other things instead of swordsmanship. It made the two boys cry, happy tears, as they hugged their father. Tanjiro looked at this scene and smiled warmly. It reminded him of the times he spent with his own family, as a tear dropped, as he missed them very much. He looked at the sky and wondered what Nezuko was doing right now. But before he could think of any more, Shinjiro bowed to Tanjiro and thanked him for waking him up. Tanjiro simply smiled, and that was that. Shinjiro stood straight as he looked at Tanjiro with respect in his eyes. You, young Kamado, are definitely a sun breath user, and I think you might be a descendant of the first sun breath user as well, he said, which shocked Kyojiro, but he knew all along. The crows that listened in on this also moved up, as they flew away, as they went back to the Demon Slayer HQ and informed Ubuyashiki that Tanjiro was an actual sun breath user and informed him of everything that Shinjiro had said. Ubuyashiki smiled and was delighted. This was a turning point for the Demon Slayer Corps. Shinjiro invited Tanjiro to stay and eat for the night, which Tanjiro did. He ate with them and they had a good time laughing and talking about stories. The next day when Tanjiro woke up at the mansion, he heard sparring outside. As he went outside, he saw that Shinjiro was sparring together with Kyojiro and his younger brother, as he was teaching them things that he hadn't really taught them before, as he showed Kyojiro the things he was doing wrong, stuff like that. It helped Kyojiro a lot. Tanjiro could see it. He was getting stronger by the second, and he was happy. Tanjiro bowed and said that he would be taking his leave. They waved him off with warm smiles as Tanjiro made his way back to his own mansion. He got a mission, however, right before he got back. There were reports of a strong demon nearby, in a village that was about a day away, but Tanjiro would probably make it if he ran at full speed in only half a day, or even less than that. The crow spoke and said that this would be a joint mission with another Hashira, the flower Hashira, Kanae Kocho. Tanjiro had received a joint mission. He had to accompany the flower Hashira, Kanae Kocho, as a strong demon had appeared nearby, and they had already sent out many slayer platoons that had all died. Tanjiro and Kanae set out. They looked around when they arrived, but they didn't really find anything. They asked the villagers, but all of the villagers seemed overly happy and enthusiastic. But they never said anything. Nothing about a demon, nothing distraught, they just looked happy. as if they were at peace, even though most of these villagers looked like they were starving or hurt. It was absurd. Nonetheless, Tanjiro and Kanae looked around, and kept looking around. Eventually, night fell, and as they were patrolling the village, Tanjiro took a whiff of something. It was a demon. He led Kanae to the demon as they both arrived. However, the demon looked scared. It seemed absolutely horrified. Tanjiro looked at the demon and thought that this demon didn't really have the air of being a powerful demon. He had been able to gauge most of the people's levels and how strong demons were, but this one didn't seem that strong. He took his sword out of its sheath, and in a second he decapitated the demon. The demon was still terrified, but it wasn't of Tanjiro and Kanae. The two of them met up once again, as they spoke about this weirdness, this strange phenomenon that they had just witnessed. It is then that they heard a voice. Oh my, they sent more? Oh, what a buffet. They looked over as they saw a demon standing there, a demon with yellowish hair, although there were different colors mixed in. His eyes seemed to be rainbow, but it was one clear, distinct feature. Upper Moon, 2, written in his eyes. The demon looked at Kanae and started salivating. Ah, join me in paradise. But Kanae just had a look of disgust on her face. This demon was creeping her out. When the demon tried saying that it was alright and that she could trust him, the demon looked over to the other person there, Tanjiro. And in an instant the demon got terrified, shakingly so. Tanjiro right now was enraged. Not only because of the demon slayers that they had sent before and the thought of them having been brutally murdered by this one individual, but by the fact that the smell of the demon was so potent. He had at least killed hundreds, if not thousands of people. This very individual right in front of him had caused suffering for so many people and was acting so happy about it, as if they were just cattle for the slaughter, as if Tanjiro and every other person that tried so hard meant nothing. It enraged him. The air around Tanjiro had changed, and his look was that of anger. He had already unsheathed his blade, but it was already crimson red, and the sight that the Upper Moon 2 demon, Doma, was seeing right now was one of horror, as memories from the past became to surge. But it wasn't his memories. They were memories from someone else, Muzan Kibutsuji. The memories of that man were surging throughout his blood. It's then that he heard it. Kill that boy. Kill that boy. Kill that boy. Over and over and over again. It was Muzan's voice. He was right now watching what Doma was doing. He saw it all. Doma was afraid as he looked at Tanjiro, but it was all a lie. He wasn't afraid. He just thought he was. The Muzan cells in his body were trembling, but he wasn't. In fact, he was excited, because not only would he have the chance to eat and absorb this beautiful lady, he could also get rewarded from Muzan if he just killed that boy. It made him excited. He was excited the entire time, simply acting afraid. As he was looking at the sky, his body in pure ecstasy. "I will," he said as he rushed forward, attacking Tanjiro with what seemed to be a fan. However, Tanjiro blocked the attack as he deflected it, changing his blade and slashing at Doma, nearly cutting his neck. However, Doma jumped back and laughed. He was still excited. Tanjiro rushed forward as he did the first form of the Hinokami Kagura, or sun-breathing dance, as he slashed vertically, actually hitting Doma with the attack. Barely. Doma's chest was now open, as it was bleeding. He laughed about it as he thought it would regenerate quickly, but his regeneration wasn't that fast. It took a moment for his open chest to regenerate. He was intrigued by it. He wanted more. This pain that he felt, he wanted to experience it more. This burning sensation. Was this love? He questioned it as he looked at Tanjiro. He was excited once more. He rushed forward and slashed towards Tanjiro with his fans, Tanjiro dodging barely, his ear getting cut. Tanjiro slashed at Doma once more, but this time, before it even made contact, a sort of mist had appeared. Kanae yelled out towards Tanjiro, yet he told her to stay back as he started coughing. His lungs were freezing. He had jumped back and slashed with all of his remaining might, as the mist had dispersed. Doma laughed. "Ah, it appears you countered that. But I wonder how well you can fight like that," he said as he looked over to Tanjiro. Tanjiro having frozen over. Part of his face looked like it was frozen, his leg was frozen, and his lungs were definitely frozen. Tanjiro was coughing, yet that didn't stop him from glaring at Doma. "Kanae, don't breathe in the mist," he said as he coughed up blood. Kanae nodded. "Just stay back for now. I'll take care of it," she said as she rushed forward, attacking Doma with her flower breathing. Yet Doma seemed to have an easy time against her. He wasn't particularly fighting seriously right now. He had to go serious for a moment when Tanjiro attacked him, but even that went against his principles, against his very nature. It's just that instinct took over for a very small moment, and he hadn't even realized it, but it made him excited. But now he felt bored. He was still excited seeing the beautiful Slayer woman trying to attack him, but he still felt so bored. He wanted to fight with Tanjiro again and looked at him excitedly, making Tanjiro creep out. Kanae rushed in once more, this time with one of her stronger moves. Yet, in an instant, her arm went flying. She looked as she was now sitting there on the ground, holding her left arm, or at least where her left arm used to be. You can stay there for a moment, okay? I'll have fun with you later. Right now, I want him," Doma said as he rushed forward towards Tanjiro, who was still coughing. The ice was affecting his lungs pretty badly. He had just taken a breath when the mist was there and it had inflicted fatal damage towards him. Doma rushed forward and slashed with his fan. Tanjiro tried to block, but he couldn't really summon the strength as he still got slashed. It was a shallow cut, but it still hurt. He had jumped back and tried to take a breath, but the more he tried, the more his lungs hurt. Quite pathetic in that state. I don't know if you'll be able to make me feel all excited again. Come on, summon that strength. Tanjiro was more angered than before. This feeling, this feeling like he was just a toy for this demon. It was annoying, but he hated it at the same time. He thought about how many people this demon had made feel this way, this exact same way. Tanjiro looked at the demon, his big red eyes filled with rage. As he clenched his sword harder than before, he took another breath as he disappeared in front of Doma's eyes. Doma looked around, but he couldn't find Tanjiro anywhere. In an instant, Doma had lost an arm. He regenerated it slowly, but he looked back as he saw Tanjiro standing there. It almost seemed as if his mark on his forehead was actually on fire. His eyes were bloodshot, and his blade had shined an even brighter red. Meanwhile, it felt like Tanjiro wasn't even there, as if he wasn't even in control of his body. Tanjiro saw each and every one of Doma's muscles, his blood flow, everything. He had activated the transparent world earlier, but now he was more focused on it. He was calmer. He could think sharply and act as if his body and mind were one. Doma rushed forward as he wanted to end this. For the first time in his life, he was fighting seriously, out of fear. And whilst it did make him excited, he didn't want to feel like this. As he rushed forward and slashed Tanjiro with his fans, yet what he slashed was simply an afterimage, as dozens of cuts appeared all across Doma's body, and in a mere instant, his neck went flying. As his head hit the ground, he looked over at Kanae, who seemed both overjoyed and in awe of Tanjiro's power. He was angered. He didn't want to go like this. He thought about it. What if he could regenerate his head, just like Master Muzan? As he tried to regenerate his head, it actually started to regenerate. He was happy. He had conquered death. The only thing in his way now was the sun. Yet, that's what he thought. But when his neck had regenerated, Tanjiro had already slashed it again. Doma, who was seeing this, couldn't even react to the speed of Tanjiro's slashes. It reminded him of someone. Kokoshibo. It reminded him of that strength, that overwhelming strength. As Doma's body started crumbling, he kept trying to deny death. After Tanjiro had cut his neck 3 more times, that was all it took for Doma to exhaust his energy. He extended his hands towards Kanae. Tanjiro, who had no more energy in his body, had already collapsed, and he looked at Doma's body move as he yelled out to Kanae to run away, but his voice didn't want to come out. His lungs were too damaged. Doma's hand started having a mist around it, as he was preparing one final attack that would destroy the city. Tanjiro summoned the strength. He didn't want to lose anybody or see anybody suffer. As he rushed forward, strength that he hadn't summoned before. Speed that he hadn't shown before. In an instant he had arrived at Kanae, as ice had already almost engulfed her. He held her down, as he could feel his back being hit by the ice, countless wounds appearing on his body. Even while trying to protect her, it still hit her mostly, as ice had hit her in various places. Kanae, who looked at Tanjiro, asked if he was okay, but he was no longer conscious. He had passed out. She tried to destroy the ice and succeeded. As she looked around, the entire village was covered in ice, and even Doma's body had been covered in ice, and it stopped disintegrating. As he laughed, his head was on the ground, and part of his neck had already disintegrated, but the rest was frozen, as he laughed, saying that he would conquer death with his ice. He laughed at the weakness of humans and told Kanae to become a demon, as they could spend eternity in happiness. However, she walked up to Doma's body, which was covered in ice. She held her sword up. As blood gushed out of her body, she looked at Doma's neck, as she could hear Tanjiro's faint breathing in the background, and slashed with all of her remaining might. In that moment she had awakened her Slayer mark. Yet, what did it matter? She slashed and hit Doma's neck. As his body continued to disintegrate, he cursed her out. He wasn't angry, he was simply acting angry. But she didn't care. She walked over to his head, and in one swell strike, parted the remainder of his neck from the ice, as he continued to disintegrate, finally dying. Shortly after that, she fell on her back as she looked at the sky, which was slowly turning light as the sun was coming up. The ice was cold. It was slowly disappearing, but it still took a while. She looked at the sky as her vision went to black. Shinobu Kocho had arrived on the scene as she started tending to both the Hashira, but the Kakushi that were assisting her were also crying. As time passed, their fates were unknown.
Escort the Hashira, stat. Apply pressure to that wound. Stop crying, focus up or they'll die.
Where am I can't feel anything. Did we win? Did we win the fight? Kana, is she okay? Mother, am I doing alright? Nezuko. Nezuko. Tanjiro woke up. He was unconscious after the battle with Doma. He looked at the ceiling as this was familiar. He had been here before, but he had never really laid here in this bed. He was at the Flower Mansion. I can't believe it. Tanjiro heard a voice as he looked. There was a Kakushi there who had just dropped some food. She rushed out of the room, but his head felt fuzzy. He looked back up at the ceiling and wondered, did he fight well? Did they win? Feelings kept cropping up and he was on the verge of tears. A voice could be heard, a very familiar voice, but it was teary. He looked again, or at least tried to, but the voice told him to not move. Stay put. Don't harm yourself further. The owner of the voice revealed themselves. It was Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira. We win, Tanjiro tried to say, but his throat hurt as he started coughing. We won, Shinobu said, tearing up, as she smiled towards Tanjiro. What happened? Tanjiro asked. As Shinobu started speaking, she gave a detailed report on everything that happened after Tanjiro went unconscious. She explained how Kanae Kocho, her sister, had finished off the demon that had suspended its life by freezing itself, When Tanjiro heard this, he instantly asked how she was doing, but Shinobu answered. She woke up about 3 months ago. She's still in rehabilitation, but she's very happy, spirited, but also very worried about you, she said, continuing her report after Tanjiro seemed satisfied that she was alive. But his satisfaction quickly turned into sadness as Shinobu continued. The entire city was leveled. No one except you two survived, Shinobu said in a saddened tone. It was utter shock to Tanjiro, who laid there. She continued her report, but it all just faded out of his ears. Faint ringing happened. I'll leave you alone for a bit. Please, call for someone if you need anything, she said, leaving the room shortly after. Tanjiro looked back up at the ceiling. His body was aching so much. Apparently it had been over a year since he was there. Almost 13 months since the fight. His body felt weak, but it still hurt. That's just how grave his wounds were. It's a miracle that he was still alive, but what did it matter? Tanjiro started breaking down as he cried. He cried his eyes out. He had all that strength, but still couldn't protect a single person. How many more people would have to die for these demons to be satisfied? How many more until Muzan Kibutsuji is satisfied? Thoughts like that rang through his head as he cried and cried. For 7 hours he did nothing but cry. Eventually, a soft feeling was in his hand. He looked over and there sat Kanae, who held his hand. She thanked him. Why was she thanking him, he thought. All those people who died. With a bright smile on her face, she thanked him once more. Thank you for saving me. Let's fight the demons together once you're better, she said with a big smile. Tanjiro stopped crying. He smiled. He had saved someone, a friend. Another month passed by before Tanjiro could even attempt to leave the bed he was in. His body looked weak. The muscle he had before was gone, and his body resembled that of his father's a lot. But worse. Parts of his skin were decolored, and his throat hurt. Even breathing hurt. Shinobu had told him that it would take at least another 8 months before he would be back, and at least another 2 months after that before he'd even be able to slay demons again. However, he didn't let that stop him. Under the guidance of Shinobu, and with the help of Kanae and all the Kakushi and all the helpers, he started training again. The spirited Tanjiro brought fire to the Demon Slayer Corps. All the Hashira were inspired. They saw how much effort Tanjiro was going through and how much he was doing just to be alongside them again, to fight against Muzan. Every single Hashira had went and visited Tanjiro when he was unconscious, and right away when they heard the news that he had gotten conscious, they all talked to him about everything that had happened over the year that he wasn't there. They told them about their adventures and the people they met, about the good foods they ate, stuff like that. All to cheer him up, of course. Even Ubiyashiki had come by and had told Tanjiro that if he retired it would be completely understandable. And he had thanked him from the bottom of his heart, saying that if Tanjiro did, he would always support him and his family. After all, They had beaten an upper moon, something that hadn't been done in over 100 years. And not just any upper moon, it was upper moon 2. He was eternally grateful towards Tanjiro, yet Tanjiro said he wouldn't stop. Every single Hashira he had talked to had brought a flame within him, had made him start training again. He couldn't push his body a lot, but he did. He trained a lot, even if it hurt. Seeing Tanjiro, who was in this condition and who was this pained, training, every single Hashira who looked at it started training as well, to become stronger, to fight alongside Tanjiro, and to not be a burden in the future fight against the demons. The entire Demon Slayer Corps started becoming stronger. Even trainers who had retired started actively training more and more. In terms of spirit, right now, the Demon Slayer Corps was at its all-time high. The fire in everybody's hearts was even more fierce than that of the Golden Era, was the thought of Ubuyashiki. In no time flat, Tanjiro had already passed 6 months, and in those 6 months he had gotten so far with his training and rehabilitation that he could go back out on the field. He wasn't in perfect condition, but it would suffice, at least for now. There was no telling if he'd ever be back in perfect condition. His lungs had taken damage, and that's one of the most important parts of a demon slayer. It was all up to him now, though his effort had never gone to waste, and he wouldn't stop now. He started fighting demons again. It was not easy, but after 3 or so months he got the hang of it again. Everything that he had to relearn, everything that he had to refix his body. He had to use some tricks sometimes in fights when he found demons that were stronger, but most of the time it was fine. It wasn't as easy as it used to be, but at least he was gaining experience. This was a completely new feeling. A feeling of powerlessness, but at the same time he could learn how to be stronger. And once he regained his strength, surely all of the things he learned would assist him in reaching an even new level. That was his thought. He continued to fight until one day he got told to go to Tokyo. And so he did. He went to Tokyo. It was almost nighttime when he arrived there, but when he did, he looked around. He didn't stop, he wasn't hungry, and he didn't want to eat anything, but he just looked around. There were scents of demons everywhere. He hunted each and every one down. First he found a demon in an alleyway. It was stupid. There were people walking by right there. He could see them. They were about 7 or 8 meters away. They were right there, yet they didn't see this demon eating one of the people. It was bad how oblivious people were in the big cities. He dispatched the demon with quick haste and moved on to the next. The next one he found was on a rooftop, silently eating a passerby as it was looking down at the people that were walking there, hunger in its eyes and its mouth frothing. Disgusting, Tanjiro thought. How could these demons enjoy this so much? In a flash, he decapitated the demon and went to the next. He didn't know how many there were here, but he could smell them. His scent had gotten even better, and he could smell hundreds of demons here. None of them had a strong scent like Doma did, but there were still a lot. He hunted down diligently each and every one that he came across, reaching over 20 in the span of just 10 minutes. That's how fast he was moving from place to place. When he got closer to the center of the city, he got overwhelmed. He had to take a step back and even went down on his knees. This smell, this putrid smell, it overwhelmed him, but he knew the smell. It was the scent of Kibutsuji Muzan. He tracked it down, killing demons on his way, as he eventually came face to face with Kibutsuji Muzan. Tanjiro's eyes were filled with rage, because right now, Muzan was carrying a human child, and next to him was a human woman. Muzan saw Tanjiro, and flinched. Whilst Tanjiro looked angry, Muzan had fear in his eyes. There were two reasons for this. Muzan's cells reacted. His skin was crawling with fear as he remembered. He remembered back then that fighter, Yoruichi Tsujikuni. Tanjiro resembled Yoruichi so much that it terrified Muzan. But not only that, Muzan knew Tanjiro was strong. After all, in Doma's last dying moments, the face of Tanjiro, who was way stronger than Doma in every aspect, was there, and it terrified him. He had sent out a hunt order. The demons were supposed to find the blue spider lily, but at the same time, every single upper moon would have to go hunt Tanjiro. But yet, he stood right in front of him. These useless upper moon, he thought. He knew that he couldn't confront Tanjiro right now. He didn't know if there were any other slayers in town, and if there was even one more Hashira, it could pose a threat. Tanjiro noticed that Muzan's blood in his body was moving towards his arm and towards his hand. He was using a transparent world right now, and he could see that Muzan's claws changed, and that blood was in them. It wasn't a lot, but Tanjiro knew what Muzan was planning on doing. Muzan slashed towards the neck of a passerby. However, it never made contact. When he turned around, he saw Tanjiro standing there. His eyes had popped out a bit more, and the veins in them were red. Blood was coming out of Tanjiro's nose, and his sword had already been drawn. Tanjiro's veins were also popping, and before Muzan knew it, his arm had been sliced off. His regeneration couldn't keep up with Tanjiro's slash, and his arm actually fell off. He felt humiliated, enraged. His arm regrew, and many of the people around him were shocked. Even his wife and kid were appalled. In an instant, the kid that was in Muzan's arms was gone, a blood splatter covering half of his clothes and most of the ground, as Muzan's veins started popping out as well. He was enraged, and he didn't hold back anything. Tanjiro, seeing this, was angered more than he already was. As he started fighting Muzan, the people around them started screaming, but with Tanjiro there, they calmed down as they were cheering him on. However, that was a bad idea. Muzan killed them. He whipped his arm, and in a second, hundreds of people, all of the spectators, were dead. Tanjiro couldn't react. In fact, Muzan was faster than him. Stronger, too. His body couldn't keep up yet. It wasn't back in its prime. It wasn't there yet. Fighting Muzan right now, all he could do was buy time until the rest of the Demon Slayer Corps arrived. However, because of the anger, Tanjiro's mark flared up. His eyes became bloodshot and bloody tears came out of them. His nose was bleeding and he was bleeding out of his mouth as well. It was that strength that he had summoned when he was fighting Doma. Something beyond. But what was it? He started fighting Muzan, toe to toe. He still got hit here and there by Muzan's attacks, but they were minor cuts as he tried to dodge as much as possible. But his precision had increased. He slashed at Muzan, who healed most of the damage he had taken, but Muzan still knew that he could probably not win this fight. If anybody else arrived, then there was a high chance he could lose, even though Tanjiro right now was in this state. It was at that moment that a scent was in the air. It was something sweet. It affected Muzan. It made him slow down. He almost got beheaded as Tanjiro slashed and hit his neck. He looked forward and he was enraged. Right there next to Tanjiro stood the one and only person who had escaped his grasp, besides that new one. Lady Tamayo. He wanted to say something, but Tanjiro didn't let him, as he attacked him over and over and over again. Muzan was terrified. Yet, he couldn't fight this right now. He was angered, but he had no choice. When Tanjiro came to slash him, Muzan acted as if he was going to block it with his arms. However, Tamayo screamed, warning Tanjiro to step back. However, it was too late. Muzan's arms both blew up, and Tanjiro got sent back flying. He had cut every single piece of, the flesh that had blown up, but it was still a lot. After that, Muzan had disappeared. Tanjiro was angered, but he couldn't fight anymore. He felt fuzzy and he was coughing up blood constantly. "Thank body," he said as he passed out, being caught by Lady Tamayo. She had brought him over to her house. He was in not the best condition, but not the worst either. She would start patching him up, together with the help of Yuichiro. It didn't take long for Tanjiro to recover. An hour was more than enough. She then started talking with Tanjiro as he had sat up straight. She explained her own situation, and that she was searching a cure for demons. In fact, Tanjiro kind of already knew she existed, because of Ubuyashiki. She had worked together with the Demon Slayer Corps before, but it's because of Ubuyashiki asking Tanjiro to lend a bit of his sister's blood to help further research on demonification and stuff like that. And Tanjiro had agreed. This led to research booming, because, Lady Tamayo could inspect a blood that had kind of resisted Muzan's cells. So, because of this, she could learn more about how to find a cure. Furthermore, she started explaining to Tanjiro why he was in such a bad condition. He had so much talent. He had so much knowledge. He knew how to move, but the problem was his body couldn't keep up. He was simply too young. She explained how 400 years ago there was the original Sun Breath user, Yoroichi Tsujikuni, who was able to, keep up because his body was extraordinarily sturdy and strong right away. The only problem was that Tanjiro had a normal body. Yes, he had trained it to its utmost limit, but the problem was that the movements and techniques Tanjiro was using were beyond that of his own body. In terms of talent and development of oneself, he was even beyond Yoruichi. That was Lady Tamayo's words. But then again, he couldn't do much else. This led to Tanjiro explaining a certain feeling he had gotten. It was only twice now. First in his fight with Doma, which was almost over a year ago, and then with his fight against Muzan. It was a feeling that made him burn up, worse than the Demon Slayer mark. It also made his Demon Slayer mark actually flare up, something entirely new. Yet, it made him so strong, whilst ripping his body apart. He could remember the feeling of his veins literally almost bursting as he slashed at Muzan. It is then that Lady Tamayo explained that this was probably a technique he was creating subconsciously, or maybe his hidden potential that he was just tapping into in a dangerous situation. Anyway, and either or, it didn't matter. Tanjiro just couldn't fight right now. If he fought one more time by using that much strength, without fully recovering or training to learn how to actually master that strength, he would die, Lady Tamayo warned. It was something he had to stay conscious of. He could no longer recklessly fight like he did before. He might have been the strongest, but if his body couldn't adapt, then all he was doing was just killing himself. Tanjiro asked if there was anything he could do to, recover quicker, get rid of the burden on his body. But when Lady Tamayo proposed the idea, he didn't like it too much. He could become a demon. Then again, he'd have to resist, or he'd have to become a demon like Lady Tamayo, but he didn't like that idea. If he became a demon, then there was no issue. He could regenerate anything that was hurt, or even better, he could use the potential he had to its fullest, even further than beyond the limits of any human ever. The other option Lady Tamayo proposed was that he stayed with her. Maybe for just a few months, but if he stayed with her, she'd be able to run some experiments on his body, give him some medicine that was miles beyond anything any other person could give him. In terms of knowledge on medicinal properties, Lady Tamayo was at least a few centuries ahead. "I'll give you some time to think about it," Lady Tamayo would say, leaving the room. She started talking with Yuichiro. He wasn't quite fond of Tanjiro, and he didn't quite like the idea of him being there, but Lady Tamayo pleaded with him. She said that Tanjiro may be their only shot at actually defeating Muzan. He had seen it earlier today. Tanjiro was going head-to-head with Muzan, and that wasn't even Tanjiro in his prime state yet. If she could help his body become stronger without making him a demon, then that in itself would lead to victory easily. Right now, the limit Tanjiro had was just his own body. If he could get away from that, if his body could become as strong or reach its peak state, then it would be fine. Then he'd be able to fight Muzan for a really long time. Furthermore, she started explaining that Tanjiro was the brother of the demon girl who had been supplying her blood to them the entire time. Maybe they could run some experiments on Tanjiro's blood. Maybe it could find a cure for demons. Yuichiro thought about it, but he just didn't like the idea of Tanjiro being there. It would lead to the demons hunting them harder than before. His intuition was right. He jumped at Lady Tamayo, getting her down, because at that moment, the entire building got destroyed. Tanjiro was fine as he was in the basement downstairs, but the entire building they were staying at was gone. When Yuichiro looked up, there stood a demon. Upper Moon 2. Akaza. Just one attack of his had annihilated the building, and Yoshiro's back was also gravely injured. It seemed like the worst case scenario. Right now they could never wish to fight Akaza. And worse, the one person that could was in no state of fighting right now. However, Tanjiro came up the stairs. Akaza looked excited. He smiled. He saw Tanjiro, who had a fiery passion in his eyes. His blade was clenched within his hand. As he took a breath, he rushed at Akaza at great speeds. Akaza was surprised. Even with Tanjiro's grave injuries, he still moved this quickly. What was he? However, the power behind Tanjiro's attack was almost nothing. Akaza blocked the blade, it only reaching about halfway through his skin. He had received a lot more blood from Master Muzan, but this was underwhelming. Doma lost to someone like this? He kicked Tanjiro back, sending him through the rubble of the house. Lady Tamayo and Yushiro looked worried. However, Tanjiro had gotten up. Right now he was no longer conscious. That one kick from Akaza was more than enough to already make him lose consciousness, but he wanted to keep fighting. His spirit moved on. He fought unconsciously, his movements almost perfect. Beyond that of perfection. He slashed at Akaza and dodged his attacks, but his strength was fading fast. His body was giving out. Akaza stopped Tanjiro's blade, catching it. Pathetic, he said, smashing Tanjiro into the ground. He lifted his leg up, looking down on Tanjiro. As he smashed it downwards, blood covering the area. Was that all it took? Master Muzan did quite the number on you. I would have enjoyed fighting you if you were in your peak, but... well, it doesn't matter. Akaza left, as he thought he had killed Tanjiro. He looked at Lady Tamayo and Yushiro, and he smirked, simply leaving. The two of them were terrified. Did he just kill Kamado Tanjiro? However, a faint breath could be heard. Akaza was long gone, but Tanjiro was still holding on to life. Very faintly he was breathing. Lady Tamayo and Yushiro quickly took Tanjiro as they ran. She was applying as much first aid as she could, but they had no tools, no equipment. They couldn't stay here. It is then that Tanjiro's crow landed on her shoulder, and a Hashira had appeared. Giyu Tomioka, the water Hashira. He was given an order to go assist Tanjiro Kamado. Most of the Hashira had received this order, but Giyu was the closest to Tokyo, and he had arrived the quickest. After all, they had heard word of Tanjiro having fought with Muzan. He looked at Tanjiro's state, and he was worried for his friend, his companion. He hated himself for how weak he was and how slow he was. However, right now was not the time to be doing this. Tanjiro's crow had spoken. Bring Tanjiro to the Flower Mansion. Together with Shinobu, they'd surely be able to heal him. Lady Tamayo, Yushiro, and Giyu all set out. with Lady Tamayo applying as much first aid as she could. They arrived at the Flower Mansion about 2 hours later. There, Shinobu and Lady Tamayo started working on Tanjiro full-time. It took almost a week of just the two of them working together to get Tanjiro into a semi-stable state. All of the Hashira were devastated. However, Tanjiro was recovering quickly. It took only a month for him to get back to where he was before. It was because Lady Tamayo was helping out. She was injecting him with certain things that made him stronger, made him regenerate faster, almost like a demon, but not quite completely. Together with Shinobu, they started researching new drugs, new things to administer, new things that could make people stronger. Stuff like that. They worked together non-stop. And another month later, Tanjiro had regained consciousness. However, he was almost back. Back to the strength he had before. It was around this time that a Hashira meeting would be held. Tanjiro had woken up. His body was in a better state than what it was when he fought Muzan. It was because of Lady Tamayo's new drugs that she had invented together with Shinobu. His body felt stronger, but he couldn't quite put a point on it, a word. It was difficult to explain in a sense. Tanjiro tried getting up, but his body still hurt. He had recovered, but he could still feel the pain, although he had no wounds. It was more of a trauma. There was Kanae. She was watching him the entire time. All of the Hashira were gone, and Lady Tamayo wasn't here right now, so she was the only one taking care of Tanjiro. She told him about the Hashira meeting. He said he'd like to join. After all, he himself was a Hashira too. Why not? Kanae looked perplexed. It's at that moment that she carried Tanjiro on her back. She carried him towards where the Hashira meeting was being held. It took about half an hour to get there. When they got close, they heard a lot of yelling and screaming. Is that Sanemi? Tanjiro thought as they entered through the door of the fence. A bit more walking later, and they had arrived. Right there were all of the Hashira. Giyu, Mitsuri, Sanemi, Shinobu, Gyomei, Kanae, Obanai. They all looked at Tanjiro, who was on Kanao's back. They looked surprised. He had woken up. What is going on? Ubiyashiki asked, as everybody had gone silent. Even Sanemi, who was yelling the loudest in their discussion just now. It's Tanjiro. Ubiyashiki looked surprised. He had heard from a report from Shinobu that Tanjiro would take at least another month or two to wake up. And that's if everything went well. Tanjiro, you don't have to push yourself to be here. Please, take your rest. You've definitely earned it, Ubiyashiki would say, facing in the direction of Tanjiro. He was completely blind. Tanjiro remembered when he had first joined the Demon Slayer Corps that Ubiyashiki had that mark that was slowly spreading over his face. But now, it had covered his entire forehead and his eyes. I'm fine. Thank you, Kanoa. You can put me down now, he'd say as Kanoa did that. He was still a bit wobbly, so she supported him. He had to be there. He had to inform them about Muzan and Akaza and everything that had happened. However, Before he could speak, he noticed that there was one more person there. His sister, Kamado Nezuko. She was on the ground and she had her hands tied behind her back. "Nezuko, why are you here?" Tanjiro asked. It is then that Sanemi started talking again, not as loud as before, but talking about how she was a demon in the Demon Slayer Corps and that they couldn't allow that. Tanjiro spoke up. "She's my sister. When I became a Hashira, I told Ubuyashiki." Ubuyashiki explained further, explaining how when Tanjiro became a Hashira, Nezuko was someone who also was in training at that time. Tanjiro had already told Ubuyashiki that Nezuko was a demon, but he had approved it. Because unlike other demons, Nezuko didn't seem to burn in the sun, and she more resembled a human than anything else. In fact, the only real thing that had changed was that she was a bit stronger physically, and she had a bit of a higher regeneration, but she had mostly human traits. She never even hungered for human meat, besides that one point in time, where she had only just turned. After a bit of discussion, they had released her guard. After all, Nezuko Kamado had killed a lower moon on her own. Lower Moon 3. A boy with white hair who started rambling. He was distraught. He was not calm at all, and he wanted to end her quickly. However, she took care of him with relative ease. Giyu and Shinobu, who had been dispatched to the mountain, had confirmed this, saying that there was no demon around Nezuko when they had arrived. She was also not wounded at all. She had become a demon slayer a bit before Tanjiro went to Tokyo, about 2 or 3 weeks before that, but he never had the chance to congratulate her, and in the time that he had unconscious, she became a lot stronger and killed a lower moon. Ubuyashiki was thankful to her. Even some of the Hashira were supporting her, saying how Tanjiro became a demon slayer to help cure her, and without his help they'd still have to deal with some upper moon, and even Kanae reaffirmed that she would have died if it wasn't for Tanjiro. The only real person that was saying that she should be dead was Sanemi. But after a few tests that Ubuyashiki had allowed, he also had to agree that she was never gonna eat a person. Even his Mariachi blood didn't do anything to her, didn't make her hunger, and she was more worried about him hurting himself than even wanting to devour it. This made Mitsuri think of her as a younger sister, because she thought she was really cute in having to worry about Sanemi, because she knew, just like every other Hashira, how rough Sanemi could be. After the discussion ended, she got brought away. She got taken away to the insect mansion, where she was gonna stay for a while until her companions had at least healed. This was also partially at her request, because she wanted to stay with her brother until he had healed. The discussion then shifted into a darker tone. As first, everybody welcomed Tanjiro back and was glad that he was there, but Ubuyashiki right away asked him about his fight with Muzan. Tanjiro explained it all. How much of a monster Muzan was, and even when he had almost cut off Muzan's head, it seemed like it didn't do anything. He went over some of the abilities Muzan had displayed and some other things like Upper Moon 2, Akaza, the new Upper Moon, about how he used fists and a fighting style. But that after even taking one blow of him, he had lost consciousness because of his wounded state. On strategies of how to deal with the Upper Moon 2, and how to deal with Muzan, on how to get stronger and things that Tanjiro, techniques that he had developed, stuff like that. In the end, Obiyashiki brought it all to a pause. As he said that for the next month, or even longer, they'd have to at least train because right now Muzan thinks that Tanjiro is dead. They don't know he's alive. Ubiyashiki looked at Tanjiro in his direction, and he spoke. Get as strong as possible, because I feel that soon Muzan will attack. He couldn't quite put a date on it, but he'd assume at least a month, maybe a month and a half. So he ordered Tanjiro to get as strong as possible. Then he looked at all the other Hashira and once again spoke. Assist Tanjiro in his training. And then learn from him as well. We've seen it in the past that training with him has exponentially made you all grow. He had gone toe-to-toe with Muzan on his own whilst not even being in his strongest state yet. There might be techniques that he had learned but doesn't know how to explain yet. If we can find those, then maybe we can get strong enough to where no one else has to die. Ubiyashiki spoke in a hopeful tone. The Ashra all bowed and nodded, with Tanjiro being the only exception, as he was still not well. He felt strong, but it's like his body wasn't his own right now. Shinobu, Kano, and Tanjiro went back to the insect mansion to treat him further. There, when they arrived, they first visited the other slayers that got hurt in the Mount Natugomo incident. On their way there, they found Nezuko, who greeted her brother and gave him a light hug, not hurting him, but still giving him a light hug. She explained how she had found some amazing friends, a boy who constantly chased her out of love, and then this kind of boar-like man that kept asking her for a fight. They entered, and there they saw a boy with yellow hair and a yellow kimono. He was laying in bed. He was not too gravely injured, but he was complaining heavily about eating his medicine, drinking it. When he saw Nezuko, he tried to look all brave and even took the medicine and swallowed it in one go, but he still made a puking expression right after because he didn't like the taste of it. He instantly started flirting with her, but after he felt a cold gaze, he stopped. It was Tanjiro. Everybody started laughing a bit because they didn't think Tanjiro would react like that. But it's because he didn't know this person. It felt like he was harassing his sister and he didn't like it. But after Nezuko had said it was fine and even held his hand, he had realized that Nezuko had also felt something for this boy. He let it be and let it slide and introduced himself as Tanjiro Kamado. The boy who introduced himself as Zenitsu Agatsuma was shocked. Nezuko's older brother was the strongest demon slayer. Everybody had heard of Tanjiro before. He was the man who had fought against Muzan just recently on his own and survived, and he was also the man who fought against upper moons without dying and even killing them, with his most popular story being almost 2 years old of him fighting against Upper Moon 2. Zenitsu was singing praise, but all it did was make Tanjiro sad. Zenitsu was praising Tanjiro about how he saved the people near Upper Moon 2, but that was vastly a lie. The entire village where Upper Moon 2 had attacked had died, with the only 2 survivors being Tanjiro and Kanae. He felt guilty about it. His face turned to a dark one, and even Nezuko told Zenitsu to shut up. He apologized, but Tanjiro's look changed to that of a bright one, saying that it's a burden he would have to carry for his own weakness. He encouraged Zenitsu to become stronger so that he could protect Nezuko. When Zenitsu heard that, he knew what Tanjiro meant. Basically, Tanjiro gave Zenitsu his blessing. It drove a fire in him, as he agreed. At that moment, someone told them all to shut up as they were being too loud. When they looked over, there was a man wearing a boar mask. He was really not in a good condition, Tanjiro could tell. Many of his bones were broken, and to have hurt his lungs, as he could hardly talk properly. His throat was messed up. Ah, that's Inosuke. He's a bit of a rowdy one, but he's a good guy, and he likes to fight, so he'll surely get along well with you, big bro, Nezuko would say, smiling. After that, Shinobu and Kanae took Tanjiro aside, brought him to another room as they had to have a serious conversation with him. The conversation started with what they had been injecting into Tanjiro, drugs that made his muscles and bones stronger. They couldn't quite explain all of the technical stuff behind it, even though Tanjiro could definitely understand it, but it was something that only Lady Tamayo really knew. Right now, Tanjiro had almost the same regeneration as a lesser demon would, or at least a weak demon would. But he didn't crave blood, and he wasn't a demon. Yes, his body was different, but he wasn't like his sister right now. Shinobu took a second and looked at Kanae, who nodded. The drugs that we've been administrating to you are rapidly making you grow. You might not have noticed, but you've grown a bit taller, and I'm sorry to say this, but you're losing your lifespan over them. Every time we inject you, you lose anywhere from a few weeks to maybe a few years. But in turn, you regenerate and even gain the strength that you would in that time. A rapid growth drug. Something mainly only in fiction, but something that would take away the life of Tanjiro and in turn give him strength. They had been giving him very small dosages, milligrams. He had never been injected with anything that could be over a year. So far, the calculations had maybe been that 3 years of his life were gone. Right now, Tanjiro's body was equivalent to that of a 16 or even 17-year-old. That's how much he had grown. He wasn't in his physical peak yet, but if they rushed it, then there could be more damage. This is why Tanjiro felt uneasy, wobbly. The last time his eyes were awake, 2 months ago, he was still in the body of a 15-year-old, but right now his body was more like that of his if he had aged 2 more years, in just 2 months' time. It was insane, but he did feel the strength increase. At that moment, Lady Tamayo entered. She had overheard the conversation. I spoke to you before, and I told you that your body isn't strong enough to follow along with the movements and the techniques you're using. You've improved even sun breathing, but because of that, your body can't handle it. Right now, what we're trying to do is, instead of turning you into a demon like your sister, who's not really a demon, more like, I guess you could say, a hybrid, instead of trying to do that, we're trying to age your body more. Make it so that that physical limit that you've had goes away, and that you can grow further. Once you've reached your peak, you can easily keep up with the movements and techniques you've been using. Maybe you can even use stronger ones, but this was the only way we could save your life. By rapidly increasing your regeneration speed through taking away years of your life. I won't bother you with the specifics, but this is all we can do, Lady Tamayo would say. Tanjiro took a moment to take it all in. Yes, he would lose years of his life, and they didn't know if it was true. If he grew 1 year, would it take away 1 year or 10? They didn't know the side effects yet. They knew it would take away years of his life, but they didn't know how many. Tanjiro spoke. Do it again. I can't grow stronger if I stay how I am, and we don't have enough time to make me naturally grow. I don't mind if I die a few years earlier. As long as Muzan is wiped off this planet, at least then, everybody can be happy. That's what Tanjiro said, as both Lady Tamayo and Shinobu nodded. And so, a month passed by. A month where everybody in the Demon Slayer Corps trained, with Tanjiro training to the extreme. He had taught Zenitsu Inosuke and his sister different techniques that would help them grow quicker, and surprisingly they had all mastered them within a week. Total concentration, constant, and other ones too. But he himself had probably the most difficult training. What he was currently doing was aging his body about 1 year every week. From 17 to 21, he had reached the physical body of a 21-year-old. The peak of what his body could be at in terms of growth. And every week he trained to reach the limit of physical strength for each year that he had gained. In terms of raw strength without any breathing technique, right now he was even stronger than Gyomei, showing just how refined his body had gotten and how much he had pushed it. The recovery of his wounds had also helped. His lungs were back to almost normal. They would never be the same again, but at least now they could keep up with his breathing. His body could also handle the full 100% of his strength without him pushing beyond the limits with that feeling. This meant that just using his normal strength he could at least fight against Muzan. There was still the adapting to do, but other than that, right now all they could do was train and prepare for the attack. However, it never came. 2 more months after training had finished and Tanjiro had regained at least the strength that he had before, and Muzan still had it intact. The Demon Slayer Corps was wary, but it was fine. They continued training. However, they kept getting reports left and right, more so than ever before. It was then that Kyojuro Rengoku, Nezuko Kamado, Zenitsu Agatsuma, and Inosuke were sent out to a train station. There were reports of people disappearing, lots of people, 200 to 300 people every night. And they got sent out to take care of it. Later that night, another report had come in. It was a emergency crow sent out by Nezuko Kamado. It had reached Tanjiro Kamado first before reaching Ubuyashiki, since Tanjiro was stationed closer and was currently out on his own mission to kill demons that were terrorizing a village. He had already dispatched of them and was about to make his way back, but the crow landed on his shoulder as it started with its report. Currently, they were fighting Upper Moon 6, who, by the crow's report, had fused himself with the train. However, that wasn't why the emergency crow landed on his shoulder. After all, Tanjiro knew that even Kyojuro Rengoku could easily take care of Upper Moon 6. In terms of power, he was at least Upper Moon 1 or Upper Moon 2 level. Not that Tanjiro knew how strong Upper Moon 1 was, but he had to base it off of his fight with Muzan. However, the report came in. They were currently fighting both Upper Moon 6 and Upper Moon 2. And it was said that Upper Moon 4 had been spotted as well. Tanjiro told the crow to quickly go to any Hashira that were in the vicinity. He told his own crow to go to Ubuyashiki and report, as he told the crow to go tell other crows to find more Hashira, more slayers in the area, as he himself would go support right away. He made his way over, and arrived after about 20 minutes. There he saw Zenitsu and Inosuke gravely injured, as, well, Kyojuro Rengoku was currently fighting Upper Moon 2, and his sister Nezuko was holding her own on Upper Moon 6, but he realized that she fell asleep every so often when fighting him. What was this? It was strange. However, he himself couldn't think about it too much or how their abilities worked, as he got attacked from behind. He dodged barely, but there was Upper Moon 4, like the crow had said. It was right. It had spotted Upper Moon 4, who was just observing. "You're in the way. I'm sorry, but I'll be ending this right now," Tanjiro said as he took a breath and a stance at the same time. In an instant, he blitzed past Upper Moon 4 and decapitated it. However, what he decapitated was just an empty husk. He looked around, but Upper Moon 4 was nowhere to be seen. At that moment, Upper Moon 4 appeared behind Tanjiro and almost pierced his back. What was this? He was so fast. Tanjiro could keep up with his eyes, but something was wrong. He felt dizzy. It was because of Upper Moon 2. Tanjiro's heart was beating faster. His mind was racing. The trauma of almost dying to Upper Moon 2 was getting to him, and he couldn't concentrate on the fight. He was struggling with Upper Moon 2. He could hear Kyojuro clashing with Upper Moon 2, yet Upper Moon 4, who was just in front of him, felt so strong whilst not actually being strong at all. Join us, Kyojiro. With your strength, we'll easily take care of the demons, Upper Moon 2 would say. However, Kyojo Rengoku said that he'd never join the demons. Set your heart ablaze, he'd screamed. It woke Tanjiro up from his delusion. He remembered his fight with Kyojo's father, and his spars with Kyojo over the last 3 months. He calmed himself down and took a breath, and in an instant Upper Moon 4 was decapitated. However, something worse was coming. Night had only fallen recently. Upper Moon 4 was disintegrated and died. So Tanjiro did the most logical action and started assisting the others. When he got to Upper Moon 1, the demon had put him to sleep. There he saw dreams of his past. He saw his family who had sadly passed away.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there. But Nezuko needs me,
he'd say as he knew what to do. He took his sword and brought it up to his neck as he sliced, waking up. His eyes were closed as he wasn't looking at the demon anymore. However, he saw everything. Through his own eyelids, he used the transparent world and his superior sense. Together with Nezuko, he sliced off the demon's head, as he told her to take a rest. After all he could tell, she was exhausted. Upper Moon 6 started disintegrating. Useless, pathetic loser, Akaza said. But, however, he didn't have time to concentrate on that. He was currently fighting Kyojiro, who was going toe-to-toe with him. He was happy. Even for a human, Kyojiro was as strong as he was. If he had become a demon, he would easily maybe even surpass Kokoshibo. However, he didn't want to lose. He started fighting more fiercely and even developed techniques mid-fight. Yet Tanjiro joined in, and Tanjiro and Kyojiro were annihilating him. Tanjiro and Kyojiro had trained together a lot. Their teamwork was impeccable. Akaza couldn't follow up, yet he protected his neck at all costs. At that moment, both Tanjiro and Kyojiro got hit by lightning. Tanjiro looked back. There was a man there. Upper Moon 3. But he wasn't the real Upper Moon 3. He looked around and saw another old man. When he looked in further, he saw a smaller old man inside of a wooden cage inside the heart of the other old man. Interesting. Kyojiro, I'll take Akaza. You take the other guy, alright? Kyojiro agreed, as their fight continued. Akaza and Tanjiro went toe-to-toe. Akaza was delighted. You're alive. It didn't feel right when I killed you last time. I even resented Master Muzan a bit, if I'm honest. But I get to kill you, whilst fighting you for real. This is perfect. Kill who? Tanjiro would say, slashing off all 4 of Akaza's limbs in an instant. His Demon Slayer mark, which he hadn't used before, had come out. I was trying to reserve my strength to hunt down Muzan, but not knowing how many years of my life I have left, I won't care anymore, Tanjiro would say as his sword turned red, crimson red. He had been restricting his own strength the entire time so that he could reserve it for fighting Muzan, but right now, he didn't care. He activated the transparent world and the seamless state came along quite nicely with it. Akaza couldn't sense anything from Tanjiro. He could see the hostility on his face, but he couldn't feel anything. In an instant, Tanjiro rushed forward and used a new technique. It wasn't sun breathing or any of the other breathing styles. What was this? The way Tanjiro moved, it was as if a mountain was coming down on Akaza. However, that was not all. When Tanjiro stabbed and slashed Akaza, it burned so ferociously, even more than what Muzan had described about Tanjiro's sun breathing. A new breathing style? Tanjiro had developed it. Something even stronger than sun breathing. He didn't have a name for it. In fact, he just let it be. But it was so strong that it had no flaws. There were no openings. And even when he launched an attack, trying to block it was almost impossible. But it seemed like right now Tanjiro was truly an immovable mountain that was having its own avalanche. Tanjiro slashed and stabbed Akaza countless times. It hurt so much. Akaza's skin was burning. That's how hot Tanjiro's blade was. His regeneration also couldn't keep up, as pretty soon he stomped his foot on the ground, with Tanjiro having to move back a bit. Annihilation type, Akaza would say as the air around him changed, and he became a lot stronger. His muscles started going stronger and stronger. And Akaza threw a fist. As his Demon Slayer art blew up, Tanjiro could see it. But if he dodged right now, Kyojo would get hit by it. That sly bastard. He was waiting for it, Tanjiro would say as he took another breath. He made a movement as he slashed through Akaza's attack, dispersing it. Tanjiro jumped up. Much to Akaza's surprise, he had just slashed through his strongest attack as if it was nothing, and now he was putting himself in a vulnerable position. However, when he looked up, Tanjiro's grace stunned him. It was as if an angel had descended from heaven to personally execute him. That's how beautiful Tanjiro's fighting art was right then and there. The peak of strength, Akaza thought as his head got sliced off of his body. His head rolled on the floor as he slowly started disintegrating. He knew he could regenerate, but he didn't want to. What Tanjiro had just displayed was something he had been chasing his entire life, but when Tanjiro had sliced his head off, he realized that he wasn't chasing it as a demon, and he had realized his original purpose. He wanted strength to protect those that he loved, but they were already dead. He disintegrated as he died. Upper Moon 4 laughed at his weakness. However, Tanjiro could feel Akaza's remorse, his sadness. He told Upper Moon 4 to shut up and that he'd be next, which made Upper Moon 4 agitated. It wasn't that Kyojuro couldn't kill Upper Moon 4, in fact Upper Moon 4 was a lot weaker than Akaza, however, the only problem was that right now, Upper Moon 4 wasn't fighting alone. He had already fused all 4 of his clones, but the worst part is this, that he made a second clone, just as strong as the first one. Ravel in the power that Master Muzan has bestowed upon me. He would shingle with his attack again, as both lightning and fire engulfed Kyojuro. He was hurt, but he couldn't do much against this. It had been more than 30 minutes. Heck, it had been over an hour, Tanjiro thought. Where were the other slayers? At that moment, Tanjiro's crow landed nearby. As it yelled out to Tanjiro that the Demon Slayer HQ was under attack, and that all of the slayers were currently fighting off countless demons. Hundreds, if not thousands of demons, with multiple demons being at least lower moon or even upper moon level. Tanjiro was worried as Upper Moon 3 started to gloat. My master knew you weren't dead. He had punished Akaza by giving a portion of Akaza's strength to me. But it's over for you, Slayers. We waited until you were gone, Tanjiro Kamado, because without you the Demon Slayer Corps is over. And once all of the other Slayers are dead, it'll only be a matter of time before you fall as well. Upper Moon 3 gloated. Tanjiro looked down at the ground. He was having a panic attack. All of this because of him? Was Muzan that cruel? Why? Why? He thought over and over and over again. It's at that moment that Nezuko's voice could be heard, as she spoke and yelled out to her brother. Fight! She'd say before losing consciousness. She had been hit by multiple attacks as well as she tried assisting Kyojuro, but she could no longer stay conscious. Tanjiro's mark flared up. His eyes turned redder than normal and his blade heated up so much that it was affecting the area around it. The heat could be felt from as far as he was away from Kyojuro and Upper Moon 3. And he was a good 10 meters away. In an instant he closed the distance and decapitated both of the clones. The main body was surprised, but in another instant, the head inside of the heart had also been decapitated, as Upper Moon 3 started to disintegrate. Impossible, were his last words as he disappeared. We'll be administering first aid to Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Nezuko. After that, I'll move out to go help the Demon Slayer HQ, Tanjiro would say as both him and Kyojuro started administering first aid. After having done that, they grabbed them and started running to HQ, with Tanjiro grabbing both Inosuke and Zenitsu and Kyojuro carrying his sister Nezuko as they ran towards the Demon Slayer Corps, with the crow leading the way. After about 40 minutes they had arrived, with Nezuko having woken up, Zenitsu and Inosuke still being out cold. There they were met with an horrific sight. There were hundreds of thousands of demons all around the Demon Slayer HQ, with Hashira fighting off hundreds at a time, slayers dying left and right, but no one was stopping the fight. Ubiyashiki was in the center of it all as he was giving his commands, coughing up blood as he was doing so. Tanjiro looked around, but he couldn't see Muzan anywhere. He joined in the fight, together with Nezuko. Zenitsu, who was still asleep, had also joined in the fight, as he was fighting unconsciously. With them there, the morale of the Corps blew up, as even the weaker Slayers started fighting off the lower moon's strength level demons. Tanjiro took care of hundreds of demons at a time. But it was at that point that he got stabbed in the back. The demon there had Upper Moon 5 written on his eye. I'm sorry about that, but you're the biggest threat, he'd say as poison started spreading over Tanjiro's body. Brother, you have no class, a female voice could be heard as another Upper Moon 6 stood there. An Upper Moon 6 and an Upper Moon 5? What is this? Daki and Gyutaro. They started fighting with Hashira. They were strong, with Gyutaro being able to go toe-to-toe to even someone like Kyojiro. The poison in Tanjiro's body didn't stop him, as he continued fighting, even decapitating Daki and Gyutaro shortly after. They both raged at each other, but Tanjiro didn't have time to stop. He was poisoned and every second counted. Thousands and thousands of demons died. Multiple slayers had been gravely injured, even Hashira. Tengen Uzui had lost an arm, but that didn't stop him from fighting, and even Gyome Himejima was gravely wounded all over his body. And they were the least hurt of all of the Hashira, with people like Kyojiro having deep wounds, non-fatal but still losing a lot of blood. 5 hours later, the fight had ended. There were 2 more hours left until daybreak. Tanjiro sat down as all around him through the grasslands were bodies of slayers who had died and blood was everywhere. A tear fell down, but he had just killed the last demon. He looked over, but Ubiyashiki sat down as well, with blood running from both his nose and his mouth. He had been commanding everybody to fight on the best of their ability the entire time, using his ability of foresight. Currently, Shinobu was treating everybody together with Lady Tamayo. No Hashira were dead, but there were definitely some that could never fight again after this. Tengen Uzui, Obanai Iguro, Mitsuri Kanroji, they'd all have to stop. They had lost a limb or two, some even their eye. They could never fight again like how they used to. Tanjiro looked in front of him at the devastation, and rage filled his heart. He had already gotten an antidote from Shinobu, but he could still feel his heartbeat weakening from all the blood he had lost. He administered first aid to himself as he took breaths that would make it so that he'd stop bleeding. His sister approached him and hugged him. She was fine because she had regenerated, but she was still sad. That coward didn't even come out himself, Tanjiro would say. However, a voice counter-spoke. Who are you calling a coward? I was just playing it smart. Tanjiro looked up. In front of him stood Muzan Kibutsuji and a samurai with 6 eyes. You know what they say. Keep the best for last. Right now, I could kill you all so easily, but I'm gonna enjoy my time with it. Master, may I fight this kid? The man with 6 eyes would say. Muzan took a look at Tanjiro and then a look at Kokoshibo, and he understood why Kokoshibo wanted to fight Tanjiro. Right now, Tanjiro was almost the spitting image of Yoruichi. He had grown a lot taller and a lot more muscular, and he looked a lot like Yoruichi. There were still a few things that were different, but his hair was just as long, and he had the same earrings on. I wanted to kill that brat, but go ahead. I still have some things to do. Tanjiro pushed Nezuko with quite a bit of force, as he sent her flying way back, almost into a wall as she caught herself. He knew that Muzan was after her. After all, she was still partly demon, so if he absorbed her, there was a high chance he could also resist the sun. He couldn't let that happen. Right now, he'd have to at least fight the 2 of them, together with Kyojuro and at least a Hashira that could fight. I challenged you to a duel as a samurai, Kokoshibo would say, as he started walking away with Tanjiro. Muzan looked at Tanjiro. Go on. You're not gonna ruin his honor, are you? Don't worry. I'll still be here if you win. But I don't think you will, Muzan would say as he walked past Tanjiro, with Kyojuro, Gyome, Sanemi, Giyu, even Tengen and Kanae all holding in front of him, as they stopped him from moving forward. Sanemi yelled at Tanjiro, "Finish that fight quickly so we can at least do this faster. We don't have all day," he'd say, making light of the situation and knowing that they just needed to keep off the others for 2 hours. Muzan's look changed as he started fighting all of the slayers that could still fight, with even Mitsuri and Nigoro, Obanai, and all of the injured Hashira even joining in, even though they were literally on their last legs. The fight didn't stop. Muichiro Tokito also joined in, as he fought vigorously against Muzan, but none of them had the strength left to really deal with them, as they summoned the last bit of strength, and even beyond that, to fight him off. Meanwhile, Kokoshibo was talking to Tanjiro. You look exactly like my younger brother from 400 years ago. Well, there's a slight few differences, but it doesn't matter. I hope you're prepared to die, he'd say as he took his blade out, getting into a stance. If I'm right, you're talking about Yoruichi Tsujikuni, right? Tanjiro asked. So you know of my brother. He's the original sun breath user. I inherited sun breathing, but I've moved on from it now. So this fight's gonna be boring if you were too weak to master that. No, it's just I made something stronger, Tanjiro would say as he got into a stance, instantly taking a breath. Once again, his mark flared up even more than when it did when he was fighting with Akaza and even Upper Moon 3. His blade, the heat that it let out was insane. In an instant, he blitzed past Kokoshibo as he had cut his neck. This familiar scenario made Kokoshibo angered. He remembered his fight with his brother 400 years ago, and how his brother dared to die before finishing their fight. "You," he'd say as he unleashed powerful attacks with his blood demon art, ravaging the area. Countless bodies of slayers that were around them were getting completely destroyed, mingled, and even completely shredded until only blood was left. Tanjiro was even more angered. As his eyes became bloody, he rushed towards Kokoshibo, landing a powerful strike after another. Countless strikes that Kokoshibo either barely blocked or had to tank. Eventually, Kokoshibo lost his left arm, and it wasn't regenerating. How is this possible? A breathing style that has never existed before and even surpasses sun breathing? What are you? I never named this breathing style. I even inherited memories from my ancestors and saw your younger brother. He really had sadness in his eyes about you becoming a demon. But he carried on anyway, even when everybody shunned him. The records we found within the Flame Hashira's records, they all mentioned that he had been thrown out. All because of you. If you're an older brother, shouldn't you take responsibility? Shouldn't you have been there for him? Supporting him? Who cares if you're weaker? Who cares if you're stronger? Your family, damn it! Tanjiro would say as he took another stance. I've decided. Heavenly Mountain. First breath. Avalanche. Tanjiro would say as he rushed forward at insane speeds. Even Kokoshibo couldn't register it fully. In an instant he had sliced the torso of Kokoshibo as the top of his torso fell to the ground. Impossible. Tanjiro turned over Kokoshibo's body, as Kokoshibo's bottom half wasn't regenerating anymore. His foot on Kokoshibo's chest, he looked down at Kokoshibo. You call yourself a samurai, but you're just a filthy demon. Tanjiro slashed, and in one go, Kokoshibo's head had fallen off. Kokoshibo's mind raced with countless thoughts. Thoughts of his younger brother, thoughts of what Tanjiro had said. He cried a tear. Tanjiro was right. Every single time Yoruichi had sacrificed something for his brother to live a better life, even going out of their house to go become a monk so that he could become the lord of the estate, and so that he wouldn't have to become a priest or a monk or whatever it was. Even sacrificing his life to fight demons who had killed all of his friends. He had forgotten everything he saw and had learned from his brother. Fight! Muzan's voice rang in Kokoshibo's head, but it was pointless. It was completely pointless. Even if Kokoshibo wanted to regenerate, he couldn't, as he disintegrated fully. The only thing staying there, the tears in the bloody field. Tanjiro turned around, his blade creaking from how much pressure he was putting on it. The sound filled the air as everyone went silent, even the Hashira who were fighting Muzan. Muzan looked at Tanjiro in horror and wanted to run away. However, in that moment he got tackled by none other than Lady Tamayo. She in an instant got absorbed by Muzan, who wanted to run away. He was fearing for his life. However, he couldn't disperse his body. In fact, he had fallen to the floor. He was weakening a lot, and in a matter of seconds he could see wrinkles all over his hand. Lady Tamayo had made drugs so potent that even the king of the demons couldn't handle it. "I hope you land in the deepest pits of hell," Tanjiro would say as he took another stance. He was right above Muzan. Muzan's thoughts raced as he was angered. However, right as Tanjiro was about to slice off Muzan's neck, he gasped for air. He had forgotten to breathe. He was so agitated and so lost in thought that he completely fell to the floor. Muzan got up as he had already stopped a bit of the drugs. He had to get away, and if he wanted to finish this fight, then he at least had to take an hour or two, maybe to fully stop them. But right now was his shot. In that split second, he could kill Tanjiro Kamado, as he extended his hand and was about to pierce Tanjiro's chest. And it pierced Nezuko Kamado. Tanjiro looked up in horror, as Muzan had stabbed her straight through her stomach. This was his chance to absorb her, however, he couldn't. If he stopped focusing on regenerating right now, he would turn to dust or become weak, so weak that any slayer could kill him. He had to focus on regenerating and keeping his form so that if any of the Hashira came at him, he at least stood a fighting chance. He retracted his arm as he started running away at high speed, with Hashira stopping him. In that split second, a scream could be heard. A harrowing scream as Nezuko fell in her brother's arms. He cried out, tears flowing, tears of blood, as Nezuko stopped responding with her eyes closed. Another scream could be heard, one closer to Ubuyashiki, a rage-filled scream. It was Zenitsu who instantly closed the distance from Ubuyashiki's house to Muzan and sliced off his arms and legs multiple times. Right now, he had summoned all of his power to fight Muzan. After all, he was engaged to Nezuko. His fiancée had just been killed in front of him. Tanjiro raged. However, Nezuko put her hand on his cheek. "It's alright. I'm still alive." She coughed up blood. She was currently breathing using the Hinokami Kagura, a lesser version of sun breathing, because that's all she was able to master. As she was stopping the bleeding and slowly but surely regenerating, she was still part demon. Tanjiro had completely forgotten, but it hurt so much seeing her almost die in front of him. Zenitsu continued attacking Muzan as he was in a blind rage. However, Muzan had knocked him out once more. Time was running out. 20 more minutes and daylight would break, and then Muzan would die anyway. However, Tanjiro wasn't about to stop. He walked up behind Muzan, who was cowering in fear. Right now, the rage and killing intent exuding from Tanjiro was like nothing he had ever seen in over 400 years. "You're dead." Tanjiro took a white stance, however, Muzan knew this was the end. He didn't even try running. He had thought of every possibility of what Tanjiro was about to do, but everything came to an end. Heavenly Mountain. Second form. Divine Rockfall. Tanjiro said in an instant, blitzing past Muzan as he held his sword forward. His sword crumbled to pieces. Alongside his sword, Muzan, who had been cut through a million different pieces, started crumbling as well. The Demon Slayer Corps had won. Weeks passed after the incident, and the Demon Slayer Corps had buried everybody who had died. Everybody who was alive had immense gratitude. The Demon Slayer Corps disbanded, and Tanjiro moved back to the mountain he lived on before. He had been proposed to by two people, Kanawa and Kanae. Kanawa liked Tanjiro a lot because Tanjiro had helped her learn, whilst Kanae felt infinite love for him. Not only had she been saved by him, but he had also helped her a lot. And they grew closer through that. So they married, with Tanjiro taking both of them as his wives. Zenitsu and Nezuko also married, with Inosuke also marrying one of the girls. They all moved to the mountain that, well, the Kamado family lived on, as they built on it and expanded. After years, they got children and were living happily. One of the kids asked Tanjiro. It was Giyu's kid. Giyu had married Shinobu, her being the only one that got along with him on a deeper level before he had realized that Sabito's death was not his fault. He asked, "Why Heavenly Mountain?" It's then that Tanjiro started explaining that even when he was younger, he trained with his father, and this mountain is where he started. Sun breathing encompasses that the sun is the heaven, and that Yoruichi Tsujikuni was the sun walking on earth. But Tanjiro was more like a mountain. Everybody laughed about it because it sounded so stupid and cringy, but it was fine. The Kamado family and all of the other families, like the Tomioka family, they all lived on. Everybody moved on the mountain, even the Rengoku family, with Rengoku finding a beautiful wife, a woman he had saved once before. Mitsuri and Obanai had also moved there, with Tengen Uzui and his wives also moving there. Everybody lived happily ever after. And Tanjiro even lived to the age of 121, far surpassing what they thought he would have. On his deathbed, he looked at his grandkids, his great-grandkids, his great-great-grandkids, and he wished them all a happy life as he passed away in peace. And that marks the end. And that marks the end of What If Tanjiro Had Godlike Talent, the movie. I hope you lovely cubs enjoyed the movie. Once again, 300 likes if you guys want a Bleach What If, and without further ado, my name's the Dragon Lord, and I am signing out.